Rishi Sunak warns against political correctness as he prepares to launch a crackdown on grooming gangs.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Monday, the 3rd of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin Daubney and Ellie Costello.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. The government will announce a new task force today to tackle sexual abuse and exploitation. The plan will also include tougher sentencing for those involved in grooming gangs.
The Home Secretary has rejected claims from the Chief Executive of the Port of Dover that Brexit is to blame for the massive delays there over the weekend. Suella Braverman said the queues, which saw people waiting for up to 15 hours, were caused by a combination of factors.
And passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike today in a significant escalation in the row over pay and pensions. The walkout by over 1,000 staff could have an impact on the delivery of passports in the run-up to the crucial summer holidays.
Donald Trump is expected to arrive in New York today as he prepares for a legal battle over hush money payments to a porn star. The court hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, with the former president's lawyer saying he's ready for the fight.
And get in touch all the usual ways via Twitter @GBNews or email gbviews@gbnews.uk and let us know where you're watching or listening to from today so we'll give your town a shout out. So to our top story this morning, the government will announce a new police task force today to tackle grooming gangs as part of a set of new measures designed to protect women and girls.
Well, the plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of the crackdown.
Well, joining us now for more is the former Special Advisor Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Charlie, top of the morning to you. So this has been a long time coming, making a lot of headlines today with a particular emphasis on the political correctness element, and particularly the historic connection between British Pakistani men. It's ruffled a few feathers, this. Is it the right thing to do or is it overly provocative?
I think it is. No, I think it's totally the right thing to do. And I think, as the Home Secretary set out in her article yesterday, that for too long it seems that this has been something that's been going on in society that might not have had the attention or the media attention that it deserves. There are thousands of people year on year that are victims of child sexual abuse. Justice needs to be brought for those victims. And I think as part of the package that is being announced later today by the Prime Minister, it is all about making sure that that justice is served to those victims and those perpetrators are brought to justice.
So what do we know about the details, Charlie? So we're talking about tougher sentencing and also support for local forces. What do you think this is going to look like?
So I think it'll be a series of measures that are coming forward, essentially to make sure that if you are in a position of responsibility, if you are in a duty of care or a position that is safeguarding for young people, so if you're a teacher, doctor, social worker, a care worker, then you have a statutory obligation to report any suspected child abuse that you think is taking place, and that the law will be on your side effectively. I don't think it's something that people should be in fear of, thinking that, you know, and if they're in that position of responsibility, that they've got more work to do. I think it's safeguarding them to make sure that they have the confidence and the ability to come forward to report what they might think is, even if they just think it is, a sexual exploitation or grooming of young people, in order to make sure that those children and the most vulnerable people are protected.
It's taken a long time to get to this moment. 2011, this first broke. The Times newspaper broke this. We have Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Newcastle, a litany of abandoned towns. South Yorkshire Police coming in for lots of criticism because they were actively campaigning against investigations because of this fear of racism. So this must be a step in the right direction.
I think that's totally right, and I think it is absolutely a step in the right direction. And it's only because, as you say, this scandal first broke in 2011, years ago. And, since then, there are still these gangs operating in this country. They absolutely need to be sort of broken up, and those people need to be brought to justice. But it's only by giving the strength and the confidence to people like the police and the local authorities that were well aware of what was going on, but just too afraid to come forward because of that allegation that might be labelled at you for being racist if it is particularly against a particular community. And as you say, in Rotherham, it was British Pakistani men that were wholly responsible for these criminal gangs, and we need to stamp that out.
The plan is going to see ethnicity data being used by the police in investigating these grooming gangs. And we heard Suella Braverman talk about this yesterday, and she singled out British Pakistani men, didn't she, over her concerns about grooming gangs. She accused the authorities of turning a blind eye, and then we saw Rishi Sunak come out and say a similar sort of thing, saying that political correctness is not going to get in the way of this crackdown. They have the same rhetoric when it comes to this, don't they?
I think that's right, and I think, look, it's important to state from the offset that, child abuse is happening, sadly, everywhere, and, there are people from all backgrounds, whether it's white men that are grooming young girls, particularly online. It is happening everywhere, but there is a particular problem in particular communities, like the case of Rotherham, that for too long hasn't been addressed, clearly, because it's still going on and it's still very prevalent in this country, which is why I think the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are absolutely right to make it very clear to anybody of any colour, any creed, any religion, any institution, that if you are taking part in a child sexual exploitation, if you're part of a gang, a grooming gang, then there will absolutely be no place in society for it, and you'll be brought to justice.
Well, thank you very much for input this morning, Charlie. You stay with us. You're back in the next hour.
I am.
Thank you.
These are your teas, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Charlie.
In a light-hearted mood.
We're getting our money's worth out of you today. Thank you very much. Thanks, Charlie.
Oh,
yeah, please do. Yeah.
Cheers. OK, well, thanks for the tea. Joining us now for more is the partner at Hugh James Solicitors, Alan Collins. Good morning to you, Alan. So what do you think we can expect in terms of the legal teeth of this? Lots of rhetoric.
Yeah.
One of the key things that Eddie just mentioned is the reluctance or even the non-recording of the ethnic origin of offenders. How key is that?
Well, lots of little issues there, or actually big issues, and the devil's going to be in the detail, because if the government does bring forward what is known as mandatory reporting, which is those who have some kind of safeguarding responsibility, being required to report concerns that a child or young person is being abused or at risk of being abused, is going to require, in my opinion, very clear legislation. As I said, the devil's going to be in the detail. It's much needed, it's long overdue, and it needs to be comprehensive with no ifs, buts or maybes, because the whole idea, as I said, is to ensure that those who've got responsibilities actually go on and report those concerns, whether it's in religious settings, social services, the police, education.
And how is that going to work? I mean, if people are legally compelled to report sexual abuse of children, let's say in schools or in social communities or in community centres, how easy is it to spot for people? Because if they're legally being compelled to do so, I mean, how would you know if a girl is being groomed or whether she just truanted from school, for example?
Well, I think we are seeing lots of training, lots of safeguarding training. So the training is out there, but what we find is that the blinkers go on, or communities may think that the law doesn't apply to them. And so it's all about changing culture. There's been concern expressed that this is a measure designed to punish for failing to report. I think that's losing sight of the issue. The issue is about changing the ethos in many organisations so that they accept and appreciate that they've got an obligation to report any concerns.
We've had lots of reports before. We've had, of course, the Rotherham report, Operation Augusta, Child A, Oldham reports. Is anything going to change this time, do you think, or is it just yet more tough talk?
Well, that's the risk. And I think the government, having said what they've said, they've thrown the gauntlet down for themselves. They need to pick this up and run with it. And as I said, the devil's going to be in the detail, because the concern always is that we end up with some kind of watered down, ineffective measure. Whereas I think the evidence and the advice all points to there being a comprehensive measure being needed. And we can look to Australia and to France and to many countries around the world where they do have effective mandatory reporting regimes. And it is extraordinary in 2023 that the UK doesn't have this. And there is really no excuse. So the government, really having sort of committed itself, as I see it, needs to get on and introduce the necessary legislation, which must, I know I'm repeating myself, be comprehensive and not some kind of watered down if but and maybe measure.
And a big part of that legislation will be tougher sentencing, won't it, for these criminals? Will that be enough of a deterrent? Will that work to have a longer sentence if you are found to be a member of a grooming gang?
Well, it's part of the weaponry that is going to have to be deployed to get on top of this horrendous problem, which is, not going away, maybe getting worse, and sexual exploitation adapts. We know about trafficking now, we know about the use of social media and so on. But I think it's all about getting behind what is going on to try and stop it happening in the first place. Now, tougher sentences may be part of the weaponry, but we should not lose sight of the fact that we need to get behind what is going on and end, any victim-blaming culture, to recognise that these terrible crimes are happening, and we need to understand more about why they're happening in order to stop them from happening in the first place.
Alan Collins, really good to have you on the programme this morning. Thank you so much for your company.
And long, long overdue, Ali. I know we've been talking about this for so long now. I really, really hope this marks a turning point in this conversation. Yeah,
and I think that point that Alan was just making there about the victim-blaming culture, I mean, that's been going on for a very, very long time, hasn't it?
And just
so
hopefully
overall, this is a turning of the tide.
Yeah, just the overall reluctance to sort of grab this issue by the scruff of the neck. It really, really, I hope this is a real moment and we can move forward. OK. Next story now. Passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike today as the union representing them claims that the government has not engaged in meaningful talks.
Yes, the walkout by over 1,000 members of staff could have a significant impact on the delivery of passports in the run-up to the summer holidays.
Now, yet more holiday woes. Joining us now for more is the head of the Points Guy UK, Nikki Calvin. Nikki, we saw those scenes in Dover at the weekend. Now, yet more chaos. What does this actually mean for punters like me, I hasten to add, whose passport is about to run out?
Well, the biggest piece of advice that I can give is check your passport now and take action right now. The interesting thing is the Passport Office says that the wait time is 10 weeks. So we saw a year, or in the last couple of years, wait times be incredibly long. The Passport Office has found new efficiencies. I think they struggled when workers were working from home through COVID. But things are a lot better now. 10-week wait is what the Passport Office says. And even with this 5-week strike, they're still saying 10 weeks is going to be the wait time. Now, 10 weeks is quite a long time if your holiday's in a couple of weeks. So it's just about the time now where you need to get your application in for the summer holidays, if that's when you're trying to go away. We're yet to see whether they'll be true to their word, whether 10 weeks still works. Anecdotally, a cabbie yesterday told me he submitted an application 2 weeks ago and he got his passport back in 10 days, not in 10 weeks, and you're hearing a lot of that now. So have they become efficient enough that they can swallow this 5-week strike? But if not, people are going to be really in trouble for the summer.
Are there ways around this? Let's say you've got a weekend trip booked and you can't really wait the 10 weeks. Can you go on the day? I mean, what are the ways that you can get a passport quickly?
Yeah, so the Passport Office offer an expedited service. I think same-day services is a thing of the past. You can get appointments, but walking in somewhere and getting a passport immediately is going to be very difficult. I think those expedited services, again, they're saying they're not cancelling them in this period, but I think that could be the first thing to go. I spent quite a long time last night trying to work out the government's compensation mechanism for when they fail people, because there's a knock-on effect. If the government says, if the Passport Office says, we're going to get you a passport in 2, 3, 4, 5 days and you miss your holiday, should the government or the Passport Office pay for your losses? And some guidance says that they should, but there's a lot of different sort of factors that feed into that. But I think they may say soon the expedited services are no longer available during the strike period. So really, there isn't a great way about it. The only way is to plan ahead. If you've got, if you want to get away in the coming weeks, but your passport has expired, you might need to look at your destination. You think about staying at home or going to Ireland, for example, where you can travel with just ID and not with a passport. So
it's Durham, Glasgow, Liverpool, London, Newport, Peterborough, Southport and Northern Ireland. So it's UK-wide strike. The way I got around it was I went to Victoria for the day. I got an appointment, I got it same day. That is a way around it. But how is this going to end? It looks like here they've only offered a 2% pay rise. There's no wonder they've turned that down. That barely scratched the surface of inflation. What are they after and how might this end?
Well, I think my focus is always on how can I help travellers and consumers get there. I think we're seeing in other industries where bigger pay rises are being given. It's yet to be seen where the government's going to get to with the Passport Office. But I think the strike if it doesn't have a big enough effect this time, they may not be successful this time around. But the next time around, when they might call more action, might be the time when they have a stronger bargaining chip, when this 10-week period is affected. Because right now we might see a 5-week strike with little effect to sort of normal people who need their passports.
So, Nikki, we're talking about the passport office strikes, but there's also the impending Easter holiday strikes, aren't there? And then the BA security personnel, they're going to be walking out as well, staging a walkout. What's your advice to travellers who are trying to get away over Easter? Should we be arriving really early to the airport?
So it depends on where you're flying from. So let's take the Heathrow strikes, for example, security staff. Now, that is limited to Terminal 5, which is the home of British Airways at Heathrow. Now, because of so many, a couple of years of travel disruption and striking, airlines, travel companies are taking action ahead of time. So British Airways actually cancelled a lot of flights ahead of time. And they're saying that on the ground now in Heathrow, it's a 10-day strike. We're in the middle of it right now. And actually passengers are not badly affected by that because cancellations already happened. Now, that doesn't help you if you lost your holiday because BA cancelled your flights. But the advice is check with your travel company. Don't turn up to the airport even on the day without seeing what the situation is at the airport, what the latest advice is, and if your flight is actually going. But getting to the airport early is going to be important, but also too early, and then travellers are going to be clogging up the airport systems. I think the biggest effect at Heathrow seems to be on airport staff as they need to get checked and freight coming in. It seems like they've taken more staff away from those points. So if you're working at the airport, you're going to have to leave much more time to get through the security checks.
OK, Nikki Cohen, thank you for your input today. I tell you what,
Lots to look forward to.
Yeah, it makes me feel like just staying in Blackpool or Skegness, doesn't it? And avoiding all this. This is a nightmare. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you. Now the time has just gone 16 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Thomas Cashman will be sentenced today after being found guilty of murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. The jury at Manchester Crown Court found the 34-year-old guilty of wounding with intent the schoolgirl's mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of drug dealer Joseph Nee.
Almost 15,000 children's operations were cancelled in 2022 due to a lack of staff and beds, the highest number in the last 5 years. The government says cutting waiting lists is one of their main priorities, and 18-month waits have been cut by over 80% since September 2021.
And Jodie Comer and Paul Mescal have won the top prizes for their West End debut performances at last night's Olivia Awards. Comer won Best Actress for her role as Tessa in one-person production Prima Facie. Mescal took home Best Actor for his role in Stanley Kowalski in the new stage adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire.
Well, do get in touch with any of the stories that we're talking about today, and there are lots of them to get our teeth into this morning. GBViews at gbnews.uk, and we will share as many as we can throughout the programme.
And here's one that's sure to get them going. Former US President Donald Trump is back. He's expected to travel to New York today ahead of his scheduled arraignment tomorrow.
Yes, New York City police have thrown up metal barriers around Trump Tower and blocked roads near Manhattan Criminal Courthouse as they brace for potential protests. Well, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is following the story.
Well, I think it's fair to say that much of the attention here in the United States and indeed across the world will be in New York over the next 48 hours. So not least of all because President Trump is expected to arrive here on Monday evening, going to stay in Trump Towers ahead of that courtroom hearing on Tuesday, in which he could potentially face up to 30 charges in relation to business fraud. That's the allegation against him. Hush money that was allegedly paid to a former porn star, Stormy Daniels, who again it's alleged that he had an affair with more than a decade ago, but it relates to money that was paid during the 2016 presidential election. Now, these are allegations that Donald Trump has vehemently denied. In fact, his lawyer has said that he is well up for the battle, that he is keen to try and fight these charges as quickly as possible to exonerate him ahead of the next presidential election. But we've ended up in this extraordinary situation where never before has a current or former US president ever faced criminal indictment in the entire history of the United States. And so there are big political ramifications about what may happen here in New York. Unsurprisingly, people are concerned. There are talk about protests going to take place ahead of Tuesday's hearing. There are concerns that they may not well stay peaceful. New York police officers have been called up in large numbers to ensure that there is adequate policing. And this is not just the only potential criminal indictment that former President Trump faces. We know that he's facing other questions about what he may well have done in Georgia during the post-election campaign, also about those documents in Mar-a-Lago that he may well have taken from the White House. And I think the bigger political question beyond what is going to happen here, and it may well be a bit of a circus, because we know that while he's not likely to be handcuffed, he is almost certainly going to have his fingerprints taken, his mugshot taken as he appears in that courthouse, is the question he's going to have on US politics and the next election here. Could it prevent him from becoming the Republican nominee? Could it prevent him? May people here in the United States think that he's not fit to be the next president? Or could it conversely rally his base in order that many people feel that he is being effectively persecuted in this criminal dealings, in this indictment? He portrays it as a witch hunt. Could it, as I say, boost his popularity? We will have to wait and see. We'll have to wait to see the detail of the allegations of the criminal indictment against them. But be in no doubt, this will be a crucial moment in US politics, a crucial moment that could determine the next election here in the United States.
Well, Trump's back, huge story, and another one still to come. Why is the current US president shunning Britain? And he's snubbing the King's coronation. We'll be speaking to Raw reporter Kinsey Schofield live from LA to get the details after the break.
You are watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, the time is just about to go 6:24, still to come on today's programme.
A former British soldier is attempting to become the first double above-knee amputee to summit Everest. We'll hear his amazing story just before 7 o'clock.
At 7:20, ahead of the sentencing of the murderer of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, we'll ask whether life sentences should be for life. We'll find out what Nigel Farage has to say on the matter.
And of course, get in touch in all the usual ways. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Now, President Joe Biden of the USA is expected to miss King Charles's coronation, though there are reports that the First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, might be in attendance.
Bit of a snub, if you ask me. It comes as Prince Harry faces pressure from US immigration to disclose information about his history of substance use.
Well, let's go live to our royal and showbiz reporter, Kinsey Schofield, with more details on this. Good morning to you, Kinsey. So let's start with Joe Biden then, shall we? Is this a snub of the King's coronation, or is this pretty standard? I don't think any US president has been to a coronation so far, have they?
Yeah, I think you're right, Ellie. By the way, Dream Team, happy Monday. I do agree that this isn't necessarily that big of a deal. Joe Biden would be the first. We didn't have a president attend Queen Elizabeth II's. But at the same time, Ellie, what a privilege. You know, we know that King Charles is dialing down the guest list significantly. So the fact that Joe Biden's been given the opportunity and he's turning it down, I can't believe it. You know, I would be there in a heartbeat. So I understand why people are talking about it, but I really don't think it's intended to be a snub.
Well, the thing is, though, Kinsey, a lot of people have been saying in America it's because he's too tired. And he certainly looks quite tired, but he finds time to go to Ukraine. He's going to find time to go to Northern Ireland for the Belfast Agreement. So surely he can find time to come and see old King Chaz.
I mean, that's a really great point. I hadn't thought about that because I had seen reports that he was just too old for such a trip. You know, and I'll bring this up as well. There were reports that he was unhappy with his seating arrangements after the Queen's funeral. So perhaps he was a little disappointed by that situation. But, you know, I love King Charles. I would hope that Joe Biden loves King Charles. I don't know if this is necessarily meant to be an ugly dismissal. And hopefully Dr. Jill Biden will be there to represent him well.
Do you think that's something that we'll see happen, Kinsey? We'll see the First Lady go in Joe Biden's place?
I do. I certainly can see that happening. And I honestly wonder if some of these headlines are because Harry and Meghan seem to be close to the Biden family. Do people feel like the Bidens are siding with Harry and Meghan? But I honestly, I look at Joe Biden. He is an older man. We're seeing a lot of gaffes lately, and perhaps somebody's just saying that they don't want to put him on the world stage like that in case something bad happens.
So next big story, Prince Harry, of course, very generous in oversharing perhaps his history of substance use, party boy. Might this affect his ability to get in and out of America?
You know, that's a great question. And this is the Heritage Foundation that has stirred this pot with their Freedom of Information request. Now, the immigration officials have until April 12th to give the Heritage Foundation or to release this information about Prince Harry. What type of visa is he under? Did he disclose this drug use that he's been so open about in his application to be for this non-immigrant visa? And, you know, I really don't think we're going to get that information by April 12th. So far, officials have been pretty closed-mouthed about it and have said that they don't, that's private information. Harry is not in trouble if he did disclose this information, if he did disclose that he'd used drugs previously. If an immigration officer saw that on his application and said, you know, I don't think this person is a danger to U.S. citizens, and I don't think he's going to continue with this behavior, and they checked him off and he let him walk through the door, you know, he's fine. He's only in trouble if he lied. So that's really what we're all looking for.
So we've spoken about Harry. It's time to look at Meghan now. Can you give us the latest on the defamation lawsuit? It involves her and her half-sister, doesn't it?
That's right. And I don't know if you remember this, but Samantha sued Meghan in a Florida court because she believes that there's defamation against her in Finding Freedom and the Oprah Winfrey interview. Meghan said, combined in both of those, she grew up an only child, said her sister had abandoned her children through Finding Freedom. Now, Judge Charlene Honeywell ruled in favor of Meghan Markle by dismissing a majority of Samantha's claims in this lawsuit, but it's not over yet. Ellie, the judge is allowing Samantha to refile, and her attorney says that she will be doing so within the next 2 weeks.
It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? Watch this space. Kinsey, thank you for that whistle-stop tour of all the royal stories in town today.
And something tells me, Addie, that Harry will get the royal wave through customs. I can't see him getting his collar felt as other people might get. But anyway, stay with us. We're discussing councils ditching traditional pay and display parking machines for a cashless alternative. And Christopher Biggins and Anna Mikolov will be taking us through today's newspapers.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News, the People's Channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back at 6:32. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages.
And The Times leads with Rishi Sunak's plans to target grooming gangs as he says political correctness has fuelled the problem.
The Guardian warns NHS delays risk harming thousands of children, with nearly 15,000 paediatric operations postponed last year.
The Mail says millions of drivers are stuck in parking app hell as more councils banish pay and display machines that take cash.
And The Sun focuses on Olivia Pratt-Corbell's killer and the £250,000 bounty on his head as he prepares to be sentenced later today in Manchester.
Well, joining us now to go through the papers in more detail this morning is actor and all-round entertainer Christopher Biggins and deputy political editor of The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mihailova.
Mihailova.
We've learnt how to say that in the last break. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us this morning. Great to have you with us. So, Biggins, let's start with you, shall we? And this is the front page of The Guardian. Delays to paediatric operations. It's prompted a big warning.
Well, it's 15,000 operations have been delayed for children. And it begs belief, doesn't it? I mean, it's just awful. You know, and this is going to impact us and children forever, because if they can't get the hospitalisation down, the operations, what's going to happen? I mean, it's a big number, and we know that there's problems with the NHS, and you know we're trying to solve those, but you know I think. Funny enough, I think you forget about children being ill. You know, it's sort of, you know, you don't think of them. You know, you think of them as being healthy and being able to get through life as easily as possible. But here we are, 15,000 paediatrics. You know, it's just awful.
If I could bring you in here, Anna. This has got the highest in 5 years. The Liberal Democrats have put this FOI in, so they're trying to cause some political storm here. It's gone up from 11,870 in 2021. Is this normal? Is this the pandemic or is it strikes? What's behind this, do you think?
I think it's a mix of those two. Obviously, this is definitely the backlog at play. This is the after effects of COVID, which people did warn about. Yeah. It's just most of those people were ignored while COVID was happening, and now, lo and behold, we're seeing the after effects here. And as Christopher says, the most innocent victims of all are having to suffer. And of course, the strikes and more strikes coming next month will not be helping this, because there was a story in yesterday's Sunday Times about more operations, not for children, but generally across the board, are having to be cancelled to deal with that. So, yeah, it's a problem. It already exists, and it's only sadly getting worse.
Well, it is set to get worse, isn't it? Because, I mean, this story remarks that many of these children's operations were postponed because of the shortage of staff.
Exactly.
We've got the junior doctors' strike coming up again. We're going to see this just get worse, aren't we?
I think, it's a very difficult situation when you think of the strikes, because, of course, you want everybody in the NHS, because they work so hard, to have what they should be given, salary-wise and money-wise. So you have sympathy, but then does the sympathy go when you hear stories like this? 15,000 children are not being helped at all. Yeah. And it's a real problem, I think. I mean, yes, but you can't... You see, I think everybody thinks that the government, whatever government's in, has a money tree. And that where this money is all going to come from, goodness knows. I do think that the working of the NHS is wrong. I mean, I think, for instance, if the NHS is brilliant. I had 2 operations 2 years ago with the NHS, and they were wonderful. But I think if you can afford it, you should be paying a little bit towards it, towards your marvellous service that you're getting from the NHS. And I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
What, paying at entry or paying for operations?
Well, not pay... I mean, like, for instance, if I'd had these operations done with having paid for it by, what's the word I want? Private, then, it would have been £25,000 for each operation, which is a lot, but of course, the insurance are making money on that. Whereas I think, if, for instance, I'd have been very happy to have paid 3,000, say, to have an operation. And I think that's, I think everybody's demanding everything free. And I think we do have a wonderful system, but I think it has to be looked into.
That's what so many people value about the system, though, isn't it? The fact that it is free for everyone.
Free at the point of entry.
Free at the point of entry.
Especially for children.
And I think that, I mean, that is certainly something that is looked at, that model, but in Ireland they have a version of that, and it's just the slippery slope where, in theory, you start off with the people who should have to pay and can afford to pay, and then it becomes too tempting to policymakers to then essentially start to drag more and more people into that bracket, and that's what's scary.
OK. And I'm moving on to the front page of today's Daily Telegraph, a story we're covering across the morning. I know something you covered yesterday in the Mail on Sunday. Rishi Sunak, the ethnicity of grooming gangs can no longer be ignored.
Yes, so Rishi Sunak will be out and about today talking to this and specifically saying that political correctness has fuelled the sexual exploitation of children. So this is part of him launching his new package, trying to tighten rules for the police in dealing with child grooming gangs, trying to get better data processing, to talk about the detail on ethnicity of grooming gangs, and basically saying that, echoing what his Home Secretary was saying yesterday on the morning round, that a lot of this is to do with political correctness gone wrong. Now, they're obviously sort of singing from the same hymn sheet on this. My slight scepticism on this line is it is a massive talking point. Obviously, you're talking about it non-stop. And I saw Suella Braverman yesterday saying this line and specifically singling out British Pakistani men. It just looked so obviously like it's going to lead the news agenda and perhaps distract, to be a cynic, from the detail of the policies, which people are already saying is not going far enough and is not actually going to deliver enough for the children being affected.
But surely, Christopher, one of the problems historically with all of this has been this reluctance to look at the reality.
Yeah, I know.
The reality is a certain demographic targeted another demographic, and the more we ignore that, surely the more harm we do.
Absolutely, and it's not going to get any better if we do exactly what you said. I mean, it's just it's ridiculous, really. I don't understand why it's happening. You know, it's a disaster.
I mean, will it work, or is this just tough wording?
Well,
do you think it'll work?
I think it's, at the moment, from what I've seen, I think it's mostly tough wording, because the actual measures, if you look at them, are things like a task force, which, you know, we've had a lot of those, and having specialist police officers to actually try and aid these inquiries. Now, that is definitely a good thing and would work. The problem is there are fewer and fewer of these specialist police officers, because there have been quite a few people leaving the force who have that sort of necessary expertise. So the devil's in the detail, as always. It's definitely good that the government is tackling the issue, because it's something that campaigners have been calling on for years.
Can I ask you, as a political pundit, is there something in this kind of red meat Monday that seems to be happening at the moment? Like the Tories are talking about things that get us going on a Monday, grooming gangs this week. Last week it was putting the dinghy people on ferries. It sets the news agenda. Is there something in deliberately trying to set the news agenda to distract from the general chaos of the economy, for example?
I think with this, I think the small boats are slightly different, because that is one of Rishi Sunak's big pledges. Although, as you say, the measures don't necessarily actually give anything new. But, yeah, of course it's a new strategy. And, of course, when Suella Braverman goes out and very specifically says the words British Pakistani men and white girls, as much as the Rotherham inquiry and everything, you know, you can have a serious conversation about, as Christopher says, those are things that need to be addressed. When those words are said, that is so obviously going to bait the left. That is so obviously going to get certain people angry. And, yeah, they do want to have that debate. They do want to have that conversation going for a couple of days, I think.
Biggins, is this the way to tackle this issue, do you think? I mean, we're talking about tougher sentencing for these gang members, and a task force, a specialist police can come and support local police with this issue. Or we were speaking to a lawyer earlier who was saying, actually, this needs to be about the victim-blaming culture. What we've seen before in places like Rotherham was blaming the girls, calling them madams for, you know, bringing their friends into these gangs. Is that what we need to be tackling, you know, where this starts?
Well, I think like everything, where it starts is the most important thing, is to go there. And if you can stop that at the beginning, then I think it helps then for the rest of the situation. I mean, it's you know, every little seed leads to something which is bad, inevitably. And I think if we could stop it then, it would be much better.
Agreed. Another thing that's getting people going today, Christopher, moving on to your next story. Don't know about how you sit with pay and display machines. I quite like putting a bit of cash into a machine. You know where you stand. They're trying to drive us towards using apps and our phones everywhere, aren't they? So this is on the front page today of the Daily Mail.
I agree with you. I mean, you know, I love cash, but, you know, cash is not good anymore. We're being told, we're being blackmailed into not using cash, and I hate it. For instance, I said to the other day, someone was begging in the street, and I said, look, have you got a thing like one of those credit card things? And he said, no. I said, well, you should get one, because I only have a credit card on me at the moment. I mean, that's what I've got at the moment in my trousers as a credit card. And of course, this is inevitable. And of course, the awful thing about the parking thing is that every borough in London is different. So you can't use, for instance, you can't use the app just for... what you can do is have an electric car like I do, and you can park in Westminster for 4 hours for £1.60.
Oh, wonderful.
They'll probably change that soon.
Of course it will. That won't last. But it's been very good up until now. It's wonderful. But, you know, I think it's, once again, I agree with you. I love putting money into machines.
Oh, see, I've never got any cash, so I really struggle. But then I also don't have the storage on my phone for all of these apps, because, as you say, each car park is a different app or a different way of doing it.
Well, I wonder, Anna, I mean, there is a definite kind of bias against the elderly here. I mean, it's hard enough, you know, for well, I guess I'm getting old now. It's hard enough for me to, like, download an app and get it all working. It can take 15, 20 minutes, whereas you can just put your money in and go. This will discriminate against older drivers, won't it?
Older drivers, people who don't necessarily have or want a smartphone as well. I mean, smartphones are still rather expensive. And, yeah, this is a huge problem, and it's something that has been exacerbated over COVID. I mean, this cashless deserts with both parking meters but also that problem with a lack of ATMs. So ATMs are disappearing everywhere. You can't actually get cash. And, you know, I've written about this before. It's a huge problem for more rural communities, for older people. It does discriminate. And we have seen, sadly, over the last couple of years, it becoming more and more easy for everyone to just go cashless. You know, all those cafes that now say only card, not even, you can't even have the option of cash.
I also don't like the idea, Christopher, of people knowing where I am. It's like, you know, if you put an app in, it's like you have to put your registration right.
Absolutely. Will be microchip next. I mean, next couple of years.
We're all being watched.
We are all being watched, sadly.
Okay.
There's this move towards a cashless society, isn't it? It's this move
It's
away
very
from-
conscious.
That's what they want.
Very conscious. And there are lots of actual economic reasons behind it, and some of it's linked to the aftermath of a financial crisis. But, yeah, it's been happening for a long time, and quite a lot of people are getting excluded by it.
And COVID exacerbated it, didn't it? Because we were encouraged, as you say, not to use cash in shops. Anna, let's have a look at something so totally different, actually, in The Sun. This is about Olivia Pratt-Corbell's killer, who's going to be sentenced today. Apparently, a bid to silence him in jail.
Yeah, so this is The Sun Splash has this story which is sourced to Telegram channels where they've picked up people in the criminal underworld basically saying that they've put a bounty on this criminal's head, Olivia Pratt-Corbell's killer, saying that, you know, because they're worried about him giving, you know, ratting out other criminals, other drug dealers. I have very little sympathy in this story, I'm afraid. I mean, it sort of reads like something out of a TV show, The Sopranos, for example, but obviously let's just not forget that the little 9-year-old girl was tragically murdered, and it's...
horrific. I mean, it was just appalling. I mean, how that happened. And all she did was scream at the reaction of something going on outside her house, and then suddenly, I think her mother went to the door.
It was appalling.
And then they pushed their way in.
Yeah. So let's not forget, I mean, bounty on criminal's head, fine. It's a good story for The Sun, but let's not forget that there's a family grieving still.
Well, we'll be covering this later on in the show. Nigel Farage will be calling in. You know, should life mean life? Maybe he'd be quite happy with a life term if he's going to be bumped off in jail, because they're saying he knows too much. He knows too much about the Liverpool drug gang scene, and he's a risk to the criminal empire. But as you say, world's smallest violin for this guy.
I think he'll have a terrible time in jail, hopefully.
No, it's just an awful case, isn't it? Really, really awful.
Terrible.
We're going to see that sentencing later on. Of course, we'll bring that to you on GB News. Christopher, let's go to you, shall we, in the Mail. And my favourite, Jodie Comer.
I know.
She looked marvellous, didn't she?
She did look marvellous in red. And it was... I watched them last night. That's why I'm a bit sleepy this morning, because they were on so late. But it was great. It was a great award ceremony, because usually the award ceremonies we do are really, really bad. And last night's was good. And it was great that she won. I missed the play. Did you see the play, any of you on the...
No, but I heard she was sensational.
I know, just
really
wonderful.
good reviews.
Sometimes the National Theatre does do repeats online. They broadcast the recorded, so that's definitely one to watch out for.
No, and also, Best Actor went to Paul Mescal for his role in Streetcar Named Desire. So there was some really good... and they did marvellous musical excerpts too last night throughout the whole show at the Albert Hall.
It was good.
Very glamorous evening.
And she looked wonderful, didn't she, in red?
And can I add, just on Paul Mescal, there's a lovely tie-in here, because so Streetcar Named Desire is on right now, so you can book that. But Laurence Olivier directed the first ever London set of Streetcar in 1949.
Really? I
With
didn't know
Vivian
that.
Lee, his wife, in the grand role, which actually led to her getting the part for the film that we know.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, Marlon Brando. Yeah. OK, we're on to this story now. We hear a lot about AI and about chatbots and about technology taking over the world. Semi-humorous story here on the front of the Star. Chatbot tells married man to leave his missus.
Yes, this is a married man who started an innocent conversation with a chatbot and then was terrified, apparently, when told that he should leave his missus for the chatbot. So this is the latest in the long line of stories that is amusing us about what this technology could mean. And, yeah, I mean, it's a slight leap after cashless society. I think is this the next frontier?
Well, I wonder if it might be, Christopher. I think people could quite happily or easily fall in love with computer-generated partners at some point down the line. I mean,
I do hope not.
Yeah.
I mean, let's get nice blood and, flesh rather than these machines. I mean, I just think we're going to be taken over. I mean, I fear for the youth of today because I won't be here when it happens. But I mean, there's going to be relationship problems and, I mean, I like the idea of having a servant. And I suppose this is probably the easiest way of doing it and the cheapest way. Well, no, because they're quite expensive, aren't they, these machines? So
servants.
So if they know their place,
if they know,
be happy to have one as a servant, but not as as a partner.
No, not as a partner.
No. Is that the way we're going?
Well, I think we should all feel a bit let down by sort of technology. We were promised, as you said, electronic robots are going to serve us cocktails, wash our cars, and instead we got someone saying, "Leave your missus."
No. I don't want to be told by a machine to leave my missus.
No. Christopher, Anna, brilliant to have you, and we've got you throughout the morning as well. Lots more to come.
OK, it is now 6:50. Let's bring up to date with all of today's top stories.
And the NSPCC has warned that focusing on race could create new blind spots when tackling child abuse. It's after the Home Secretary singled out British Pakistani men as a particular concern when it comes to grooming gangs. The Prime Minister is expected to reveal a raft of new measures to protect young women and girls later, including the use of ethnicity data to support investigations.
And the queues at the entrance to the port of Dover have been cleared after a weekend of disruption, according to the P&O ferries. Over the weekend, coach passengers faced long delays. Some were stuck in 8-hour-long queues before finally making it to the port. Port officials blame delays on a lengthy immigration process, but Suella Braverman has rejected suggestions that Brexit is responsible.
Chelsea have sacked their head coach, Graham Potter, following a defeat to Aston Villa on Saturday that dropped them into the bottom half of the Premier League table. The 2-0 loss at Stamford Hill drew angry calls from supporters for Potter's departure.
A time for a wonderful story of former British soldiers preparing to become the world's first double above-the-knee amputee to reach the summit of Mount Everest.
Yes, Harry Budgamanga, a Gurkha veteran, is getting ready to fly back to Nepal to take on the challenge. And our reporter Lisa Hartle went to meet him.
I can walk much faster with this one, but the one is more than 5 kilograms, so not really good for climbing mountains. So let's take this one away.
After losing both of his legs in Afghanistan, former Gurkha Harry Budgamanga thought his life was over. But in May, he will be the first double above-the-knee amputee to take on the world's tallest mountain, Mount Everest. After serving for 15 years in the British Army's Gurkha Regiment, Harry was hit by an IED while on patrol.
At the time, I thought that my life is finished. I had to live my life rest of my life on a wheelchair, but also I would need a carer rest of my life. That's what I thought. So looking back, who thought that I would be climbing Mount Everest? No, I never thought that. Never thought that. But the good thing is about this, when you are positive and you start doing the things, and it just opens the one door and another, and you see the opportunity, not just about yourself, but also you create an opportunity for other people as well.
Harry had to fight to get the law changed in Nepal, which banned double amputees from climbing Everest. By taking on the mountain, it's his aim to change the negative perceptions that some have around disability.
Hopefully this will make awareness of disability and change the perception on people with a disability, that they don't ban us, or some of people with the disability themselves as well have a courage to challenge themselves and live a meaningful life.
It'll take Harry 3 times as long to conquer Everest, using an incredible amount of upper body strength.
Harry's kind of got a unique challenge in climbing Everest. Harry's climb
by the nature of making it safe, is a totally different climb. And Everest is already expensive, but for Harry, it's even more so. So much so that I think after like the costs of fulfilling things, Harry needs to raise about £320,000 to make the climb happen. And he's doing really well, but that's the first mountain, and there's a bit of way to go.
This was Harry after climbing 6,000 metres to the summit of Mirror Peak.
Yes!
Harry will begin his climb of Mount Everest in May, which will be an extra 3,000 metres.
Wow. You know, climbing Mount Everest is slightly more risk. My life has always been risk. I went to the war to protect the people, people's freedom. So yeah, I'm very, very happy to take a risk for other people, and that's always been the case in my life.
Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
I mean,
What
wow.
a legend.
Just astonishing. I mean, if you think about skipping your run or the gym this morning, maybe that bloke there can inspire you.
No excuse, have you? No, 3 times as long that's going to take Harry. Absolutely incredible. Best of luck to him. Stay with us. Lots more coming up on the programme. We'll have more on the government's new plan to tackle grooming gangs.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Plenty of sunshine over the next few days as high pressure is in charge, but it does turn a bit wetter later on in the week. And we can see that in the pressure pattern. High pressure just sat to the east of us, keeping these weather fronts at bay. However, Wednesday into Thursday, they will manage to move in, bringing some cloudy conditions and rain for a time. Before then, that high pressure builds back in for the Easter weekend. So this morning, a cold start out there. Frost in places, but quickly melting away. Plenty of sunshine to come through the day, though the cloud does thicken and move in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern and Western Scotland, though it should generally stay dry here throughout the day. Best of the sunshine for much of England and Wales. Blue skies for everyone. Generally light winds. Chilly along the east coast. Temperatures still here struggling to get into double figures, 14 or 15 across some western areas in the best of the sunshine. Into the evening time, it will turn quite chilly as the sun begins to set under those clear skies. Cloud thickening for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland still, but an increasing risk of some patchy rain and drizzle moving in here into the early hours. And just notice the blues returning on the map by the end of the night, indicating a frost out there. Temperatures falling close to, if not below, freezing. So it means a chilly start to Tuesday morning, some ice around first thing, but this will quickly melt away with that strong April sunshine. And then another fine day to come for many areas, just perhaps the Western Isles and parts of the Highlands seeing some patchy rain and drizzle at times. Northern Ireland should largely stay dry, but thicker cloud here through much of the day. And the sunshine also turning hazy for parts of North Wales, Northern England. Best of the blue skies holding on in the southeast. And again, temperatures similar, 11 to 14 for many. Over the next few days, we'll see bands of rain starting to move in. So Wednesday turning wetter and windier, particularly on Thursday, quite a cloudy day before the sunshine tries to return for Friday. Temperatures around average.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak warns against political correctness as he prepares to launch a crackdown on grooming gangs.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Monday, the 3rd of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin Daubney and Ellie Costello.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. And the government will announce a new task force today to tackle sexual abuse and exploitation. The plan will also include tougher sentencing for those involved in grooming gangs.
The Home Secretary has rejected claims from the Chief Executive of the Port of Dover that Brexit is to blame for the massive delays there over the weekend. Suella Braverman said the queues, which saw people waiting up to 15 hours, were caused by a combination of factors.
Passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike today in a significant escalation in the row over pay and pensions. The walkout by over 1,000 staff could have an impact on the delivery of passports in the run-up to the summer holidays.
And he's back. Donald Trump is expected to travel to New York today as he prepares for a legal battle over hush money payments to a porn star. The court hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, with the former president's lawyer saying he's ready for this fight.
We can get in touch the usual way via Twitter, GB News, or you can email us, gbnews@gbnews.uk. Let us know where you're watching or listening to us from this morning.
So to our top story this morning, the government will announce a new police task force today to tackle grooming gangs as part of a set of new measures designed to protect women and girls.
Yes, the plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of the crackdown.
Well, join us now for more is a former Special Advisor Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Charlie, good morning to you again. So all over the front pages today, the thorny topic of ethnicity leading the news agenda this morning. Sunak, I think quite rightly, speaking out about the ethnic origin of most of the perpetrators in these grooming gangs, British Pakistani men, but it's caused quite a lot of political furore, hasn't it?
It has, but I think, look, you know, this is something that goes back to 2011, where we saw the first time, you know, grooming gangs targeting white young girls, and where there was a systematic failure of the local council, the local authority, the police, the education service, the people that are there to protect young people the most, that were too afraid or ignored the problem of particular people, particular gangs, grooming gangs, of British Pakistani men that were taking, that were abusing young people, no action was taken, and this is all about correcting that in the announcements that we've heard yesterday and will later today.
Yes, so put some flesh on the bones for us if you can, Charlie. We are going to hear this announcement later. It's going to be launched officially later on today. What are we expecting to hear? We're talking about tougher sentences and also new support from specialised police officers for localised police officers.
Exactly so, because for too long people have not been able to speak out where they feel as though they should do, all through fear of being called racist or any other kind of name, when actually the full focus needs to be on the child and protecting young people. And therefore there'll be specialist police officers rooted in forces across the country to ensure that they have the technology, that they have the means, and they have the way to target the people and target specific individuals and gangs where they need to be targeted to disrupt the gangs and to bring people to justice.
And Charlie, the Labour Party, keeping this on the politics for a moment, are complaining about this. They're saying these plans are inadequate. But when we look at the litany of shame, the roll call of towns where this happened, Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Newcastle and many more, they were typified mainly by Labour councils, weren't they?
Exactly so, and this goes to the heart of the problem, whereby this is a government that wants to deliver, that is getting the information from police forces, which they have to report the crimes that are taking place, and if it is the case, as it still seems to be, that there is a trend of particular communities or particular groups of people, regardless of their ethnicity. But if it is the case that there is a systemic problem within British Pakistani local areas, then the police should have the absolute right and the authority to go and target those gangs. And Labour councillors that ignore that or say that it isn't a problem is fueling the fire, frankly. It is this government and the Tories that are delivering and protecting young people.
Yep, here to that. Charlie, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Charlie. Well, joining us now is a survivor of sexual abuse, Kelly Lees, and former detective at Greater Manchester Police, Maggie Oliver. Good morning to you both. Really good to have you both on the programme. Kelly, let's start with you, shall we? You are a survivor of child sexual abuse. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
I was abused at a children's home, and then when I started running off, I was groomed. Councils didn't intervene, public intervened, and that's still happening today. This has been going on since I was a child. So, I've heard all this before, that they're going to crack down on these gangs, that they're going to start intervening, that they're going to start preventing, that more help is going to happen. I've heard all this before. I've heard this from previous prime ministers. We've heard this from previous politicians. So I am not convinced. We haven't got enough police officers. We haven't got enough resources. So how is this going to happen?
Kelly, one of the tragic things we've heard historically is the lack of empathy from police officers towards survivors, towards people like yourself. What was your experience with the police and what would you like to see change?
I was laughed at. I was laughed at. They didn't contact me. I then went to the Truth Project. I then went to the foundation. It's only because I went to these places that they're actually, dealing with this case. And I actually says, I reported this years ago. They says, well, we're here now.
Kelly, what would you like to see happen? I mean, when you hear about this, the longer sentences and the specialist police officers coming in to support local police officers, is that where the focus should be? Or do you think it should be on victim-blaming culture and supporting the victims? I mean, what would you like to see Rishi Sunak talk about today?
We need more support for people like me, because what else needs to happen? They need to build relationships with these people, and they need to go into these organisations and these services and nip them cultures in the bud, because until they stop them cultures, then how are they going to help these survivors?
And Maggie, I wonder if we could bring you in now. This is something you were one of the very first people to speak out on this, on the issue that's making the front page today of the cultural aspect of this. And you were right all along. How does it feel to see this being spoken about now so openly, or do you think it's just yet more tough talk?
I want to say, first of all, that Kelly is one of our ambassadors at the Maggie Oliver Foundation. And, you know, over 60% of our ambassadors are themselves survivors. And they come from a place of knowledge, of experience, of understanding. These words today that, you know, I read them all yesterday. I have, you know, any decent law-abiding citizen will not disagree with one word in that statement. But what I fear, like Kelly, is that this is yet more rhetoric. It is all right saying, you know, we are going to crack down on these grooming gangs. We are going to bring in specialist officers. Well, as Kelly rightly says, you know, the police, the criminal justice system, CPS, the courts, they are on their knees. You know, we are not going to bring about the, you know, monumental changes that we need without investment, without proper training of police officers. You know, the sentencing is pitiful. The jails are full. Less than 2% of reported rapes and abuse ever reaches a court. So this, to me, you know, I have heard Priti Patel, I have had conversations with her, with Sajid Javid, saying the same things. I really hope that this is different, that these words convert into action. Louise Casey's report shines a spotlight on the Met. That could be any police force throughout the whole country. Policing is in crisis. There is a problem with attitudes, with cultures, with, you know, inexperienced officers. And, you know, we talk about a task force, which is great. But, you know, when I was in GMP, we had a serious sexual offences unit, which they closed down. Experienced police officers and detectives are leaving the police in their droves. Who is going to train a 19 or a 20-year-old recruit to deal with this? It's all very well to say the words. And I think my fear, to be honest, is this is, you know, a little bit of electioneering. We've got a general election coming up. The cat is out of the bag. I spoke about this 10 years ago, and you're quite right. When I started to speak out, you know, I was, I think, one of the very first people to say publicly that the grooming gangs were predominantly made up of Pakistani Muslim men. There is a problem within that culture that needs addressing, and we can't tiptoe around the edges and avoid dealing with it. But the last thing I would say is that the law in this country says a 12-year-old child or a 13-year-old child cannot have sex with a 50 or a 60-year-old man. That is against the law. So it doesn't matter for me where the abuser comes from. The law should be dealing with every single man, whether it's a priest in the Catholic Church, whether it is, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, or whether it is a Pakistani Muslim man. We need to throw the full weight of the law behind it. And, you know, a few words won't change the reality that these kids, as Kelly has said, have been judged. You know, they've been making apparently lifestyle choices. The authorities need to step in, they need to act, they need to prosecute, and these men need to serve long sentences in prison, not walk out the doors like 3 years after having raped a 13-year-old child where we had a fetus and proved DNA. All those things are part of the neglect and the failures that we have seen for decades. So, yeah, I welcome the statement and the spotlight on this issue, but let's see whether action follows the words.
And Maggie, briefly, what would you say to critics today who are saying this, talking about it in this way is just racist?
I completely refute that. That's why we're in this place to start with. This is a problem of child abusers being allowed to continue their abuse, and we need to get a grip. And actually, the last thing I'll say is that within that community, within the Pakistani Muslim community, many young women are being failed as well. They are isolated, they are being ignored. We need to do away with political correctness. But really, you know, the truth hurts. But within this country, we have laws. And if you live in the UK, you abide by those laws, whether that's me or my son or anybody walking down the street. And I don't care where they come from. The law is there to protect children, and it needs to be used effectively to do that.
Maggie Oliver, really good to have you on the programme this morning. And Kelly Lees, thank you so much for sharing your story as well. Really, really important topic and something we'll be talking about a lot today.
I just find it so difficult, so astonishing and moving. I really do. Anyway.
Yeah, and very brave of Kelly there to share some of her story. And like you were saying earlier, I really hope this is kind of a turning of the tide and not blaming the girls in this anymore. I mean, 13-year-old girls we're talking about, 12 and 13-year-old girls quite often. Children.
Oh, God. Anyway, let's try and move on. Children are waiting over 3 years for NHS treatments, according to new figures, with almost 15,000 paediatric operations cancelled last year alone.
A shortage of beds and staff, as well as problems with equipment, were given as reasons for the cancellations. Well, joining us now to discuss this is NHS GP Dr Anita Raja. Good morning to you, Dr Anita. Really good to have you on the programme. So paint a picture for us, because it's a very distressing headline that really drives it home for lots of people. 15,000 children's operations being cancelled.
It's dire, it's disappointing, certainly not something that you'd want in a first world country like England. Unfortunately, you're absolutely right when it comes to the main issue here. We've got, it's multifactorial. We've got a lack of theatre beds, theatre staff, recovery nurses, lack of doctors, lack of social care, lack of equipment. Now, we certainly need to address this. And if you look back, it's years of negligence on part of the ministers because they haven't taken these problems seriously. Of course, whistleblowers have been talking about this, and there's, a lot of attention has been brought towards these problems, but they've not been addressed and not been taken seriously. And this is why we're now letting the public down. It's ridiculous. There are more than 7 million people who are waiting to get an operation at the moment. It's more than many countries within Europe, the whole population. So you can imagine that I don't think we're going in the right direction here.
Well, Dr Raja, this is the Freedom of Information request by the Liberal Democrats. So they're trying to make a bit of political hay out of this. But surely a big part of the backlog is lockdowns and the pandemic. Well, we knew that we were putting the NHS basically under cotton wool, causing a huge backlog. And all the political parties willed this along. Is the lockdowns surely is the biggest part of this?
No, I don't think that the lockdown was a big part of it. Let's look at the figures and numbers pre-lockdown. Even pre-pandemic, we were struggling quite a lot when it came to referrals to the hospital. So you'd be waiting at least an average of 6 months to see a hospital specialty. Just to put things into perspective, yes, those 6 months are now 12 months. For instance, if you were to see ENT and a GP would do a referral to the ENT department in the hospital, you'd be waiting on an average of 12 months. If you were to see a neurologist, now you could be waiting up to 18 months. If you were to be waiting for a hip replacement, you could be waiting 2 years. Yes, the numbers may have doubled, but if we look at the numbers pre-pandemic, they were pretty dire at that time as well. If I were to speak to my German colleagues and to tell them that here in the UK, our patients have to wait 2 years to get a hip, whereas in Germany, they'd be waiting 3 to 4 weeks, then that's a huge difference. So I think pre-pandemic, we were already drowning, but now we've drowned completely.
One of the main talking points in this story is the fact that many of the children's operations were postponed because of a lack of staff. So surely this is only going to set to get worse with the junior doctors walking out again next week for 4 days.
Yeah, so many people are going to now say that the junior doctors have taken an oath and it's their duty to serve mankind. And of course, they're trying to do that. But the reality of the fact is that the junior doctors have not taken an oath to put their patients at risk. At the moment, 500 people are dying every single week because they cannot access care on time, which essentially means that if you come to your GP, I'll just give you this example because it's very pertinent, and we suspect cancer, sometimes this 2-week wait referral, which should only take 2 weeks, can take up to 10 weeks before secondary care makes contact with you. Bear in mind, this is someone that we're suspecting cancer in. This is the situation of the NHS at the moment. It's very easy for our ministers to not come down and address the ground realities. It's very easy for our ministers to say that they have now been able to provide 2 million extra appointments per month. But when it comes to GP appointments, the reality really is that we are struggling. Our staff is on its knees. One doctor is doing the job of 10. They're not far off from minimum wage, and they've got a 100,000 debt when they start. So really, the doctors have got a couple of options here. One is to work for the monopoly and their militant employer. The second is that they walk out and immigrate to countries which would give them a better working environment. Now, from clapping to sacking, this is ridiculous. How are we blaming the junior doctors for anything? Whether the junior doctors strike or don't strike, we are in a dire state at the moment.
Dr. Roger, perhaps another way is NHS reform. I mean, you talked there about the situation in Germany, much more healthy over there because they have the opportunity to pay to go private. They have a mixture of public and private. Is that not a way out of this? Those who can afford to pay for operations where there's a big backlog can pay for it to ease the burden on the NHS. Is the actual issue that the NHS needs a root and branch reform?
This is what the government wants to do. The government wants to privatize the NHS. And as you and I are talking about this, it's already happening. Yeah, but they're already doing that. The rich are already paying privately to get their hip replacements. Do you think somebody who's fortunate enough to be able to pay for it will wait 2 years on the NHS? I don't think so. And I think the rich of this country also understand that they want to take the pressure off the NHS by paying privately if they can. Yes, the NHS needs a reform because it's not fit for purpose by the sounds of it. But let's start by paying our frontline workers. These are people who put their lives at risk. The public was out clapping for them. The government ministers were clapping for them. We've lost hundreds of our colleagues who were frontline workers during the pandemic. And now you're threatening to sack them. And let me tell you one more thing. The doctors are not asking for a pay rise. It's restoration of pay. They've had the same pay for the last 10 years. And with the rising living costs, it's now becoming impossible for them to survive on this pay. Doctors are now telling their children not to get into the medical profession. What do you think we're showing the public? We're telling the public not to get into this profession. We're telling the public not to become doctors and nurses. Okay. And this is not a good precedent that we want to set.
OK, Dr. Anita Roger, thank you for that impassioned display this morning. Thank you very much.
The time is 7:20. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
And Thomas Cashman will be sentenced today after being found guilty of murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. The jury at Manchester Crown Court found the 34-year-old guilty of wounding with intent the girl's mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of drug dealer Joseph Nee.
Almost 1 million passport applications could face delays in processing because of a 5-week strike that begins today. More than 1,000 passport office workers across 8 sites are walking out, which is expected to have a significant impact. The PCS Union General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter.
And Jodie Comer and Paul Mescal have won the top prizes for their West End debut performances at last night's Olivia Awards. Comer won Best Actress for her role as Tessa in one-person production Prima Facie. Mescal took home Best Actor for his role as Stanley Kowalski in a new stage adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire.
Still to come, as Olivia Pratt-Corbell's killer is sentenced, we'll be joined by Nigel Farage to debate whether a life sentence should last a lifetime.
And you're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. The time has just gone 25 minutes past 7. Still lots to come on today's programme.
Yeah, and the Easter holidays are upon us. At 7:45, our consumer expert Kate Hardcastle will be up here giving us tips on celebrating without breaking the bank.
After 8, as more and more teachers report unmanageable workloads, author and maths teacher Bobby Seagull will tell us what he thinks the solution is to teachers leaving the profession.
We always look forward to having Bobby Seagull on the show. He's a breath of fresh air. And you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. Now, the man who shot and killed 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbett in Liverpool last year will be sentenced for murder later today.
And with former Olympian Oscar Pistorius being denied parole last week for murdering his girlfriend 10 years ago, questions have been raised about the sentencing process for serious crimes.
So, are courts too lenient? Should life mean life? Well, joining us now to discuss this is former prisoner Mark Johnson, who says criminals have the ability to rehabilitate. Meanwhile, GB News presenter Nigel Farage says we need to get tougher on those who have committed a serious crime.
Well, let's start with you then, Mark. So lay out your position. So you believe in rehabilitation, don't you?
Yeah, not only do I believe in rehabilitation, I believe that in the courts and the process of the courts as well. And I also follow the data. So the reconviction figures of like people who've served life sentence are only 4% over 5 years, when actually the real issue is the group below that. So you've got an overall reoffending figures of over 60% within 2 years and 80% within 10 years of that group. And what I sort of reject is this polarisation over these heinous crimes versus the actual public interest in what's happening within the prison and probation system today.
Nigel Farage, I'd like to bring you in now. We have the sentencing today of Thomas Cashman, a child murderer. Would you like to see this guy rot in prison forever? Or today there's a bounty on his head, apparently, Nigel, of £250,000 to have him bumped off in jail. Is jail too good for him?
Look, I think getting involved in this particular case may not be helpful, but there's a bigger, broader debate. And Lee Anderson, the MP, Conservative MP for Ashfield, raised it a couple of months back. He said he was in favour of the death penalty. Now, of course, the London elite went absolutely berserk. How dare anybody even suggest that? But when you poll the country, about half the people think we probably should have the death penalty. Here's the point. When the death penalty was removed, back in the mid-1960s, it was done in a vote in Parliament with a very, very specific promise. And that was that for the very worst of crimes, life would mean life. That was the contract with Parliament. That was the contract with people. And it's not being met. I get Mark's broader point about the role of rehabilitation and how important it is and how reoffending rates for theft, burglary, assault are much, much higher than we want them to be. But in the specific case of people who commit outright murder, let's be clear, life should mean life. And if it doesn't, then the contract with the British public has been broken.
So, Nigel, what about the cost of a lifer as well? I mean, some of the figures are eye-watering. Up to £87,000 a year, £240 a night to keep people in maximum security jail. That's more than a luxury hotel. Do the public have a right to be appalled about the sheer cost of this as well?
Well, they do. They've got even bigger right, I think, Martin, to be appalled by the cost of foreign criminals in our prisons, who should, without doubt, be sent back to their original countries. But look, when it comes to getting the judicial system right, cost is a factor, but it's not the factor. The factor is having public trust in the whole system. And I think the reason that Lee Anderson got the reaction he got is that people increasingly are feeling that even for the worst kinds of murder, people will serve 10 to 15 years in prison and then in many cases be out. And there is a general, broad feeling that that is just wrong.
Bring you in at that point, because we did see, didn't we, former Olympian Oscar Pistorius. He was denied parole last week for murdering his girlfriend. He's only served 10 years and could be up again for parole as soon as next year, serving just 11 years for a horrific murder.
It's, I mean, the UK has the highest rates of imprisonment in Western Europe. And, serving whole life sentences, we've only got to look across the Atlantic to America to see that, they lock up a lot more people, yet their reconviction figures are a lot more higher. I mean, the idea of bringing back the death penalty is a terrible one as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the data as well around acquittals post-execution speak for themselves. But also, it's this idea of, in a civil society, the one thing that makes us different to people who commit murder is the ability to kill. And, I think that that kind of needs to be taken out of the discussion altogether. The thing that I'm really worried about is the public are educated via the media. The media generate these sensationalist stories and actually lack detail. And I remember in 2010, an Ipsos public survey opinion poll for Jack Straw actually was very similar to the recent one that RAB announced about swift justice for offenders. And it said, the public want to know that politicians are being tough on crime, but they don't want to know any of the detail. And I think that's where we are today, is we need to get involved in the detail around making sentencing effective, making prison sentences effective, making sure that the governors of each prison are actually got the tools and equipment and programs to make, and also being responsible of measuring that people don't come out and do the same thing after they've been in their prison, and the same as probation. I mean, today with probation, they're 100% caseload today. So whether we like it or not, we want a lot more people up. It doesn't work, and we're ultimately the public's going to pay for it. One is financially, but also with the reconviction figures.
Nigel, big story on the front of the papers today, of course, is the clamping down on grooming gangs. Long overdue calls for tougher sentencing on them. We've seen instances of rapists being let out after just serving 1 or 2 years. What would you like to see sentencing-wise for the grooming gang leaders? How hard would you like to go on these kind of criminals?
Oh, absolutely. There should be incredibly long prison sentences for people like that. I mean, look, we are where we are because of this fear of being accused of racism. Just in the last few days, Michael Vaughan, former Yorkshire and England captain, has been cleared after 2 years of his life were destroyed by claims of racism. The chairman of Cricket Scotland resigned over the weekend because they now say he hasn't found enough racism. So, I'll believe it when I see it, if the police really do go hard over these grooming gangs. But just you wait. There will be the most massive backlash coming from what we call civil society, by which we should mean the London elites. So, as ever with Suella Braverman, I admire what she says. I just as yet haven't seen any delivery on this or any other issue. But I think, frankly, what happened in Rotherham and elsewhere, all around the world, is a stain on our country. Tough talk is great. Action will prove, I think, much harder.
Mark, what do you make then of those who have been convicted of the most serious crimes, of murderers, rapists, grooming gang members? I mean, when we're talking about sentencing, what do you think would be appropriate for those who have been found guilty of the most heinous crimes?
Look, the sad thing in this country, in the detail of it, when you get sentenced in a prison, I believe in the justice system. I believe that the judges are equipped to make the appropriate sentences. The thing that is the most worrying thing is when somebody goes to prison, justice in this country is so far detached from reality. These people go to prison and they're so neglected, and that'll generate, well, they should be and we should lock them up. But 22 hours a day bang up behind a cell door. And the worst thing is nobody's ever questioned about their crimes. And I'm talking individually. And if I was a prison governor, as an ex-prisoner, as an ex-rehabilitated prisoner, actually, if I was a prison governor, they would be faced with what they've done every single day of their prison sentence. And I would invite the public in to watch this rehabilitation process take place. And when I've been part of programmes and stuff, and I've taken people into prison, which I would like to invite Nigel, actually, actually their opinions change once they actually see that actually something really needs to be done daily with these people whilst they're serving these sentences. And it's just not, I'm afraid.
Well, Mark, that's an offer you made to Nigel. Nigel, is that an offer you'd be prepared to take up, to go inside a jail, spend time with offenders and maybe see the different side of the story?
I've met Mark before. I do not doubt for one moment his sincerity. And if we could get better rehabilitation rates and fewer people coming out of prison and then going back in within 2 years, well, the whole of the country will be better off. So, Mark, I absolutely accept your offer. No, I absolutely accept it.
Right.
I think, we're talking here about general crime as opposed to murder and life sentences. But yes, I accept.
Great. Well, you heard it here first. Nigel Farage is going to go into jail. A lot of people would like to see you there for other reasons, but only just joking, boss. Mark Johnson, thank you very much. That sounds like a great GB News show in the making. Nigel Farage, look forward to seeing that one. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Right, that will definitely get you talking at home. Let us know what you think about that. Do you believe in rehabilitation, or do you think life should mean life? Let us know. gbnews@gbnews.uk.
Sure, and stay with us. We'll have all the latest on Donald Trump as he prepares to appear in court in New York. Going through the papers with us also Christopher Biggins and Anna Mihalahov. Over straight after this.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:41. Joining us to go through the papers this morning is actor and entertainer and all-round legend Christopher Biggins and the deputy political editor of the Mail on Sunday, Anna Mihailova. Good morning to you both. Anna, let's go straight to the front page of the FT. It's all kicking off in New York. Trump supporters.
It is indeed, and obviously that's the big story for tomorrow. Donald Trump is finally going to have his court appearance and all the drama that ensues there. And over the weekend, we've already had Trump supporters protesting outside his Florida Mar-a-Lago resort, which is a real taste of what's to come. So the roadshow is in full swing over there. And of course, you know, as some of the other papers show today, he is actually picking up support in the polls. He's obviously now completely outstripped his Republican rivals for the candidacy, according to all the polling, off the back of this court case.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because we've had an email in from Tony who says, I'm going to make a prediction. Donald Trump will win the 2024 USA election. And there is that point, isn't there? I mean, Donald Trump's fan base is so huge and so strong that even this, if anything, just riles up their support of him even more.
Completely. And obviously his whole line in this is essentially he's sort of speaking to the people in America who feel like the system is against them. So he's basically saying, look, the system is pursuing me just like it pursues some of you, and it's unfair, and I'm the man to represent you. And that definitely chimes with a lot of people in the way that, you know, in 2016 it was it was all about drain the swamp. That was his thing. And now it'll be, I'm just like the little guy. I mean, the irony of this, the man who is completely has spent his whole life effectively being above the law, is saying he's like the little guy, is of course ridiculous, but this does reinforce it. And I think the irony, I mean, you say he's on track, like your reader saying, you know, Tony saying on track to win. Well, I mean, it's quite possible because this kind of court case is unprecedented, and the idea that it isn't political, or that it won't have a political knock-on effect or consequence is ridiculous to think.
I wonder, Biggins, just bringing you in on this one, because there seems to be no evidence that paying hush money to a porn star has actually hurt him at all amongst his supporters. In fact, his popularity has gone up.
I know. I mean, it's amazing, really, because I think everybody in America wants to be like him. That's the thing. I mean, they see, it's like that whole thing here in this country. If somebody sees a Rolls Royce in the street in this country, they'll go and scratch it, put a key down the side. Whereas in America, they think, actually, if I work hard enough, I can one day get a Rolls Royce. And I think this is where Trump scores, is that people look up to him because he's done amazing things and very successful. And I don't think they think it's wrong that he should take a call girl. I think what is wrong and stupid of him is to put it through the books. I mean, that is ridiculous.
Should have kept to the cash economy. I think there'd be quite a few people that would like to do more than run a key down the side of Donald Trump, to be fair. I mean, for example, in New York, there's talk they wouldn't even be able to find a jury that would be balanced. He's so unpopular in his hometown.
Well, I mean, but that's a tiny percentage, though, of America, isn't it? You know, in majority of America, he's loved, adored. And you can see that when he goes and talks to people. But I mean, he's not going to go to jail, is he? I mean, no. Anna, do you think?
I mean, look, this isn't the only case, but realistically, I think not off the back of this, but there are other cases coming down the line, and I think as some commentators have already been saying, it's almost like it's the this is getting so much attention, but as you say, the actual charges, which is cooking the books, doesn't appeal to people compared to some of the other more serious cases that he's got coming down the line. And it can actually just end up fueling his support, fueling this idea that it's all a persecution of him. And completely backfire.
I wonder, Biggins, you know, you've done a lot of pantomime in your time. This is pantomime, isn't it? And it's stuff that Trump likes. He likes being the bad guy. He likes being the pantomime villain. It helps his popularity.
He does. I mean, you know, and he's got charisma. There's something about him, you know, that is attractive. You know, I mean, it's a sort of. I'm not sure everybody feels that way, but I mean, there is something there. He has to have something there for the Americans to absolutely adore him, and they do.
Anna, what do you think we're going to see in New York tomorrow? I mean, we're talking here about Florida fans already protesting outside Mar-a-Lago. What do you think we'll see in New York? I mean, there's already barriers been erected by police officers there.
Yeah, they're gearing up for protests. There's also going to be a speech by Donald Trump after his court appearance. So he's going to go back to Florida and deliver a speech to his base. Because obviously the base, I mean, New York is not his scene. It's not where his support lies. He'll go straight back and deliver this big rallying speech, where we'll see how he weaponises all of this. But I think in New York, it'll just be a huge piece of theatre.
Will, yeah, absolutely.
OK.
We should all get tickets for it.
Yeah, if only we could. Biggins, moving on to the next story now, front page of the Daily Mirror, the chaos at the port of Dover.
I know, 17-hour ferry queue hell. I mean, it's just been appalling this whole weekend. I hear now it's cleared, by the way.
Yes.
I hear that to say that it's gone. But, you know, they were... Doug Bannister, the Port of Dover boss on travel chaos, said it's post-Brexit. Every passport needs to be checked before vehicles can get into the EU. Now, this must take forever. I mean, you know, for instance, a coach with, say, 60 people on, everybody's passport has to be checked. And it's, you know, this is where it's going wrong, and it's just appalling. And first of all, it's awful if you're actually on a coach or in a car trying to get to France. But if you live in that area, what must it be like if you try and go to Sainsbury's or something? You know, it's impossible.
Yeah, the traffic around Dover is so bad at the best of times, let alone...
It's not a good selling point for go and live in Kent.
And I mean, if you're going away for a weekend as well, I mean, a 17-hour delay, you might as well just turn around and not bother at all.
Well, I think there was a group of boys who were going to play football. Well, I don't know whether they got
That's one riotous coach journey.
They'd have missed Anna, politically, people are blaming Brexit for this. Suella Braverman is saying it's not Brexit. A lot of people probably think if a comet struck the Earth, it would be because of Brexit. Is it Brexit? Is it the French being short-staffed, or is it just bad planning?
I mean, I think it's hard to argue Suella Braverman's point that it's completely not Brexit because of the checks that have to happen now. But I think it's more also the UK being punished over Brexit continuing to be, because this idea that France couldn't think outside the box and make it easier if they wanted to, is for the birds. For example, Portugal, I remember, you know, Lisbon Airport, they had the EU queue, which was completely empty, and then the non-EU was full of Brits from the flights, was just snaking around. And then eventually they said, well, actually, we'll put the Brits in with the EU queue. So you can do that if you want to.
Well, great. One quick story from you, Biggins. This is a subject close to my heart. The prices of curries are soaring by up to 50%.
It's terrifying, and we all have a curry. I mean, and suddenly, you know, everything's going up, including your naan bread. I mean, it's just awful. I mean, here was a chicken vindaloo was £6.45. It's now £8.15.
Wow.
You know, and this is... I do blame COVID for this. I mean, I think there was all restaurants, including Indian now, the prices are huge. And also wine. You know, you go to a restaurant and a bottle of house wine is now £50.
Wow.
It is
50 quid. Where do you go for your meals?
Oh, very posh places.
I was going to say.
No, I know they're all, you know.
Expensive taste is our Biggins,
No, but it is ridiculous how... And, of course, they blame the staff, you know, they're blaming Brexit as well, because all the staff left after Brexit. But it is a terrible thing.
A quick mention of the pun headline there, cash-weary nons. I quite like that, and it's Rogan Dosh. You must rely on the pun for the sun for a
You
nice
couldn't
pun.
resist, could you?
Thank you very much, Chris.
Anna Biggins,
Anna,
thank you
cheers.
very much. Thank you.
OK, with the Easter bank holiday coming up this weekend, the kids off school and celebrations in full swing, we all run the risk of spending more than we can afford to do so at the moment.
But our consumer expert, Kate Hardcastle, says we don't need to break the bank and we can do lunch on a budget, Biggins, and buy affordable chocolate eggs and party whilst tightening the purse strings as well. Well, she joins us now. Good morning to you, Kate. Really good to have you on the programme. Well, we were just talking there in the newspaper review with Biggins about the cost of food. We're seeing it shoot up everywhere, aren't we, in restaurants and in the supermarkets. And it's going to be a worry for lots of parents during the Easter holidays who have to feed their children those 3 meals a day.
Yes, good morning both. Of course, we know the food pressure's been there, particularly on the essential items. We've seen items like milk, bread, cheese, sugar just go through the roof. I mean, I still remember not that long ago being able to get that full pint of milk for just about £1. We're looking £1.65 in the discount supermarkets, £1.80 probably in your corner shop and up. So these are certainly challenging times when the basics are so expensive. And that's why I've been out to try and make sure I understood where you could get your best Easter value.
Where have you seen the best bargains then, Kate? What's your advice for families that are worried about the cost of food this Easter? How can they still celebrate but keep saving as well?
I think you're quite right in that it's about taking the pressure off. We do tend to see at these times of seasonal events, lots of adverts. Everyone seems to have full tables of food. It looks very sumptuous. So, you know, just remember that is advertising. It's what's right for you and your family. You do not have to have the roast dinner. You do not have to have all the bells and whistles. It's about being together. First tip, if you want to be really different, is perhaps forget the chocolate Easter eggs at all. I mean, chocolate is chocolate at the end of the day. So one of the thoughts I'd had a look at was, why not try a website like Approved Food? Approved Food sell food that is perfectly safe to eat, but past the best before date. So it's just the best before date, a signal for retailers only to remove from the shelves, not that you can't eat it. They currently have a lot of the Christmas chocolates on sale, big servings. Well, the only thing that makes it Christmassy is the wrapping. Take the wrapping off, get a cheap and cheerful dish from maybe £1 Stretcher or Poundland for £1, pop all the chocolate in it. Guess what? It's chocolate at the end of the day. So, that's where we spend a lot of money on that packaging, on those Easter wrapped gifts, and really we're just paying a lot of money for all the trimmings. When it comes to the Easter lunch, if you still do want to do the traditional roast, there are some Easter meal deals available. Traditionally, Marks and Spencer's always come out with something at this time of year, a £20 meal deal. They don't reveal the details of that till the 5th of April, so a little long to wait. But I was having a look at Ocado's meal deal, which is £15. I looked at the best value you could achieve for that, and by choosing, you get one main, so if you choose the beef, 3 sides, which of course, if you choose the roast potatoes, the green beans, the cabbage, the dessert, choose the profiteroles, which is £5. That's getting you £24.30 of value for £15. But in addition to that, if you manage to do your big shop and perhaps put some of the washing powders and things like that onto that Ocado shop, there is a 25% first user offer at the moment, running till the 5th of May. Now, that means you get an extra 25% off, up to a maximum of £20 if you spend over 70. So you could then apply that extra 25%, getting your Easter lunch down to £11.25.
Now, Kate, is my mouth getting bigger or are Easter eggs getting smaller? Because I'm sure that the Easter eggs are all going to be the size of mini eggs soon.
I don't know how you want me to answer that, Martin. Diplomatically, I think we have got shrinkflation going on, which is certainly how we're seeing chocolate biscuits, crisps, etc., all shrinking because they're very concerned, the manufacturers are very concerned that we as consumers are shopping, very aware of prices, and when we see £1, we want a £1 deal, so make sure you check your weights.
Well, Kate Hardcastle, really good to have you on with all of your Easter savings. You've been doing your homework, that's for sure. Right, coming up, we'll have more on the government's new grooming gang task force as the Prime Minister hits out at political correctness.
But first, Greg Dewhurst has your Monday morning weather forecast.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Plenty of sunshine over the next few days as high pressure is in charge, but it does turn a bit wetter later on in the week. And we can see that in the pressure pattern. High pressure just sat to the east of us, keeping these weather fronts at bay. However, Wednesday into Thursday, they will manage to move in, bringing some cloudier conditions and rain for a time. Before then, that high pressure builds back in for the Easter weekend. So this morning, a cold start out there. Frost in places, but quickly melting away. Plenty of sunshine to come through the day, though the cloud does thicken and move in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern and Western Scotland, though it should generally stay dry here throughout the day. Best of the sunshine for much of England and Wales. Blue skies for everyone. Generally light winds. Chilly along the east coast. Temperatures still here struggling to get into double figures, 14 or 15 across some western areas in the best of the sunshine. Into the evening time, it will turn quite chilly as the sun begins to set under those clear skies. Cloud thickening for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland still, but an increasing risk of some patchy rain and drizzle moving in here into the early hours. And just notice the blues returning on the map by the end of the night, indicating a frost out there. Temperatures falling close to, if not below, freezing. So it means a chilly start to Tuesday morning, some ice around first thing, but this will quickly melt away with that strong April sunshine. And then another fine day to come for many areas, just perhaps the Western Isles and parts of the Highlands seeing some patchy rain and drizzle at times. Northern Ireland should largely stay dry, but thicker cloud here through much of the day. And the sunshine also turning hazy for parts of North Wales, Northern England. Best of the blue skies holding on in the southeast. And again, temperatures similar, 11 to 14 for many. Over the next few days, we'll see bands of rain starting to move in. So Wednesday turning wetter and windier, particularly on Thursday, quite a cloudy day before the sunshine tries to return for Friday. Temperatures around average.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News. From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak warns against political correctness as he prepares to launch a crackdown on grooming gangs.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 3rd of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin Daubney and Ellie Costello.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. The government will announce a new task force today to tackle sexual abuse and exploitation. The plan will also include tougher sentencing for those involved in grooming gangs.
The Home Secretary has rejected claims from the Chief Executive of the Port of Dover that Brexit is to blame for the massive delays there over the weekend. Suella Braverman said the queues, which saw people waiting for up to 15 hours, were caused by a combination of factors.
And passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike today in a significant escalation in the row over pay and pensions. The walkout by over 1,000 staff could have an impact on the delivery of passports in the run-up to the summer holidays.
Donald Trump is expected to travel to New York today as he prepares for a legal battle over hush money payments to a porn star. The court hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, with the former president's lawyer saying he's ready for this fight.
And please get in touch all the usual ways via Twitter at GB News or email gbviews at gbnews and let us know where you're watching from so we can give you a shout out. And Ellie, we've got quite a few coming in already.
Yeah, lots of you getting in touch this morning. Nicola from Norwich says, morning, Ellie and Martin. We're talking about passport office strike. She says the official estimate of 10 weeks to renew a passport doesn't bear any relation to her experience. She got it 2 weeks after applying, similar to her friends as well. She said, is this official 10-week estimate a case for the passport office managing expectations so their performance looks better when they do it quicker?
Well, my passport's about to run out. I've been nagged about this for ages by the missus and I haven't done it. So I think what I'm going to do is try and head down to a passport office and do it on the day. Yeah,
Yep.
on typical lastminute.com. We've talked about the cashless society earlier. That's because they're getting rid of pay and display parking meters, so you've got to use an app. A lot of people are annoyed about this. Keith from Inksip says, you discussed the move to cashless society. I paid 50p for a wee the other day in Windermere, not in the Lake, I hope, itself, maybe in a public convenience. It used to be 1 old penny, as I didn't have a 50 pence coin. I had to use a debit card to pay to go to the toilet. No doubt soon I have to use a digital currency debit card or I will burst.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people just don't carry cash anymore, do they? I had that the other day. I was out reporting. I needed to go to the loo, and I had to just crawl under a little turnstile to go to the loo. Not good. Well, I didn't have 50p. Peter, of the main reasons for small businesses to do away with cash is to stop staff stealing money. Anyone with a small cash business has experienced it. Yes, Peter, I think lots of people would agree with you, but also every time that you use the card, those small businesses get charged for it, don't they? They're losing money on card payments. I'm sure lots of business owners would disagree with that as well.
I also don't like the idea of them knowing where you are all the time. Like, I know my phone tracks me everywhere I go, but here I am parking, here I am paying. They can track you all over the place. And on grooming gangs, we've been talking about this all morning. Ken from Kent, he's like saying, OK, it's great to focus on grooming gangs, but what about the sexual misconduct by our MPs? Another important topic. But let's not forget grooming gangs in the news today, and rightly so, long overdue.
Yeah, keep your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
So to our top story, the government will announce a new police task force today to tackle grooming gangs as part of a set of new measures designed to protect women and girls.
The plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of the crackdown.
Let's get more from our political reporter, Catherine Forster now. Good morning, Catherine. So a lot of tough talking here. We've spoken to Maggie Oliver earlier and also survivors, and they're all saying, sounds great, but is it just yet more tough talk?
Yes, well, time will tell, of course, how effective these measures will be. But certainly, most people will feel that this is long, long overdue because, of course, we know that grooming of particularly young, working-class white girls has been going on for many, many years. We think specifically about places like Rochdale, Rotherham, Telford, Newcastle, and really it seems to be that often the authorities, the people that should have alerted what was going on and acted, simply did nothing because they were worried about being called racist, they were worried about being called bigoted. So Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Home Secretary Suella Braverman today, first of all in Leeds and then going across to Rochdale, announcing a series of measures. First of all, they're announcing a task force. They're saying that specialist police will be parachuted into areas with grooming gangs to help. Secondly, there will be mandatory reporting of ethnicity data. That hasn't happened before. There will be tougher sentences if you are found to have been in a grooming gang. And also there will be a legal requirement for people who have a duty of care to children, people like police officers, teachers, people working in social care. If they suspect that a young person is at risk or being groomed for sexual exploitation, they will have a legal duty to speak up. Now, of course, we will see what difference this makes. Already quite some criticism. Suella Braverman coming in for quite a lot of flack by the fact that she has said, drawn attention to the fact that she says many of these grooming gangs involve British, Pakistani, males. And people like West Yorkshire Labour Mayor Tracy Brabin has said that this is dog whistle politics. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has said hopelessly inadequate, belated and narrow, and that Labour were calling for these measures nearly a decade ago.
OK, Catherine Forster, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed down in Westminster.
OK, for more on the story now, we're joined by online grooming expert and former Met investigator John Taylor. Good morning to you, John. So what do you make of the announcement today? Is this yet more rhetoric, or are you hoping for real action?
I think we all hope for real action, but, you know, in reality, if we remember back to the Telford gang that were identified, and this is back in 2009, straight after that, the actual, if you like, task force or team that was set up to combat that was shut down and all the funding taken away. For too many years, whatever government's been in power, there hasn't been the funding there for police officers to actually carry out the investigations, because this is an unreported crime. And as we've known for many years, the police actually only investigate crime that's been reported.
So that's quite an interesting part of this task force which is being launched today, is this mandatory reporting. How do you think that would work, and will it work? How easy is it to spot that a young girl, for example, is being groomed by a gang? How would somebody know that that's happening, and how would they report it?
Yeah, I mean, Elliot, it's a good question. I mean, when I do my lectures and we talk about indicators of child sexual exploitation, and that will show the vulnerability. But what we've got to remember here is that these girls that have been picked, if or chosen, are already in a vulnerable position within society. And that's the big difference. So there will be indicators that they're running away, they're playing truant, or there's a lot of secrecy involved, they're not talking to adults. And that then you start to look at, well, which adults are we talking about? Well, that's carers, that's parents, and that's also the fact of police officers. And it's some of these horrendous stories that we've heard of in the past where victims have gone into police stations and been told to go away and come back when you're sober. So I think a lot of it will be that, yeah, it's very good to hear that it's got to be a statutory requirement, but actually that's already been in place, because all these individuals that are in a position of safeguarding, a lot of them have had all the training to actually make sure that the reporting process is stuck to. So it'll be interesting to see how they adopt this and what they're going to do when there's a breach of it. So what's going to happen to that individual?
So, John, in terms of the recording of data, we've seen in South Yorkshire, for example, in 67% of cases, the data on the ethnicity of the offender is missing. It's simply not there. There's been a reluctance to take it down. How harmful and damaging has that been from your point of view as an investigating officer into apprehending a perpetrator? Surely it's an essential part of a profile's data to know their ethnicity if it's pertinent, as it is in the case of grooming gangs.
Oh, 100%. You need to know the data. And again, this political correctness that they're talking about does exist. It has existed. Police officers and detectives, once they're involved, are very reticent to actually start using certain words because they think they're going to be taken off the investigation, or they're actually going to find themselves in another position. So that will help, but certainly, keeping data away. But again, Martin, what you must understand, these detectives, whilst they can't talk about it, they are aware of what the whole situation is. They are aware of what is happening. They've had a lot of their hands tied behind their back about certain things that they could comment. So a lot of this comes down to not just how we're going to investigate them in the future, but far more education and getting people out there. We need the communities to actually step up and actually let them, because this is what we call intelligence-led policing. So the task force are going to go in, but they're going to wait for information to come in from the community and hopefully these brave victims who will come forward.
Have lessons been learned from scandals that we saw in Rotherham and Telford?
Yeah, the lessons have been learned. There's also been a lot of frustration, especially as I mentioned earlier, when you get a set of police officers who are taken off. The child investigation unit that was in Telford was shut down. So there's a lot of frustration there for officers. The other side to this is we've got to remember, we talk about grooming. Grooming has sort of 4 different areas. You've got your online grooming, you've got your gang grooming, you've got your stranger danger, and then you've also got the position of people in position of trust. So what we've got to understand here when we're talking about grooming gangs is a lot of the actual individuals that do the grooming to isolate these vulnerable victims, what they're actually doing is they may not actually have sex with a victim, but they're actually going to put that poor victim, and that victim's going to become like a sex slave, because a lot of the victims will not know who their abusers are, who are raping them. So we've got to understand here, this task force to go in, this isn't a simple grooming case. This is organised sex slavery. And that's the true, true of this actual offence being committed by what seems to be mainly British Pakistani men.
John Taylor, thank you for your time this morning, and I'm sure many viewers at home will be echoing your sentiments. Let's put political correctness to one side, the fear of being called racist to one side, because we have a duty and an absolute obligation as a society to helping these vulnerable girls and women. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Yes, let us know what you make of that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, nearly half of teachers feel their workload is unmanageable most or all of the time. That's according to a new survey.
I'm sure my missus watching is one of them. The majority of teachers said more staff and said smaller class sizes would have a big positive impact on their workload in the coming year.
Well, joining us now for his take on this is maths teacher Bobby Seagull. Good morning to you, Bobby. Great to have you on the programme. What do you make of this then? More teachers, smaller classrooms. Quite difficult to see that happening, considering we're seeing teacher strikes at the moment, where there is a real struggle to recruit and retain teachers.
There really is. And Ellie and Martin, the sort of context behind this, I think, is our Prime Minister recently said that the reason he entered politics was to improve educational standards. In fact, he said even more than that, the single most important thing, in fact, the silver bullet to improving the life outcomes of people in this country is education. And if that's still the case, and I hope so, Mr. Sunak, then actually it's looking after our schools. And actually who delivers education to our young people? It's our teachers. And teaching, again, I used to work in banking in the city for about 7 years. And even though the hours are longer, there were like 12, 13, 14 hours in the city, actually teaching, when you're working with young people and you've got 30 children in front of you, lesson after lesson, that is emotionally demanding. And again, teachers do it because we love passing on our knowledge and skills to the next generation. But there is a serious issue in terms of retention in the profession. I think in the past decade, 1/3 of teachers have left and not returned back. So if we're looking at trying to improve educational outcomes, we really have to think about how can we improve the quality of life for teachers. And a big part of that is the workload.
OK, so some of the numbers in this, Bobby, are eye-watering. 88% want more funding, perhaps no surprises there. 79% less punitive checking. That's after the suicide of a head teacher over Ofsted. 73% want smaller class sizes. Now, as a teacher who always brings a smile to our face whenever you come on, what kind of things can teachers do to help their lot to improve? Because I know a lot of burned-out teachers. How can they improve their daily lot?
So I think it's about, again, the class sizes is an issue. When you've got 30, 32, 34 children in a class, it makes it difficult, no matter how confident you are as a teacher. If you've got a few children that are struggling in a class, actually, how can you make sure you have a lesson that's good enough to meet the requirements of each individual child? And I think with class sizes, one is, again, if you have more teachers in a school, again, simple maths, more teachers, same number of students, actually, that spreads out even more. And I know that teaching assistants can be very valuable, especially if you're working with students with different special educational needs. So that's a sort of class size. But the second aspect is, one reason a lot of teachers do additional work, and I'd say bureaucracy and paperwork, that doesn't necessarily improve the outcomes of children, is the Ofsted inspection regime. And again, I used to work in the city. I know it's important. You need accountability. Every sector, whether it's business, politics, charity, you always need people to monitor the performance. But with Ofsted right now, that 4 grade, whether you're outstanding, good, inadequate, requires improvement, that's still, that fear looms over teachers to the point where they focus on trying to think, what do Ofsted want, rather than actually, how can we improve educational outcomes for our children?
What do you think needs to be changed then, Bobby, in terms of the Ofsted inspections? Does there need to be more of a focus on children, perhaps a more holistic approach throughout the school year rather than those 2 intensive days? I mean, what do you think is the best way forward?
Yeah, I think we should make you Education Secretary, Ellie, after your analysis there. It genuinely is the more holistic approach. I think you're right. It is the holistic approach because parents can be provided a report that explains, the pros and cons. Again, all parents, they deserve to know which schools are doing well and which are not doing well. But that can be done with a more informed 2-3 page report. But I think it's just the words, because even though Ofsted will say, we actually produce a detailed report where parents can read, parents are not going to read a 20-page report. All they do is they open it up and check, it's a good school. Oh, actually, it requires improvement. And they'll make the decision on that. So just, I think, removing those words and maybe having like a 1 paragraph or 1-page descriptor, that in itself would, I think, change the game.
Bobby Seagull, it's always a pleasure, never a chore having you on. And, I think it'd be a good idea. Send politicians into schools for a day, get them to teach for a day, give them 39 kids who don't want to even sit down, let alone be taught, and then see how they get on. I think we'd have more teachers damn sharpish. Bobby Seagull, thank you for your time this morning.
Do you know, that was actually the thing that struck me the most. I was covering the teachers' strikes, and it's speaking to general members of the public about whether they support teachers' strike, and they were annoyed that their kids weren't being educated that day. But then they also said in the same breath, I couldn't do it, couldn't pay me to do it. So I mean,
my mum was a teacher like yours, and she said to me, "Don't get into teaching. It's so hard."
It's hard.
Yeah, even though she loved it as a profession, same as my auntie, they would say it's so hard, and it must be harder than ever to teach these days.
Well, it's a vocation. It's a vocation, isn't it? It's caring, isn't it?
So it's now 8:18. Let's bring up to date with all the rest of today's top stories now.
And Thomas Cashman will be sentenced today after being found guilty of murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. The jury at Manchester Crown Court found the 34-year-old guilty of wounding with intent the schoolgirl's mother, Cheryl Corbell, and the attempted murder of drug dealer Joseph Nee.
And almost 15,000 children's operations were cancelled in 2022 due to a lack of staff and beds, the highest number in the last 5 years. The government says cutting waiting lists is one of their main priorities, and 18-month waits have been cut by over 80% since September 2021.
Jodie Comer and Paul Mescal have won the top prizes for their West End debut performances at last night's Olivier Awards. Comer won Best Actress for her role as Tessa in the one-person production Prima Facie, while Mescal took home Best Actor for his role as Stanley Kowalski in the new stage adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire. Well, Balmoral Castle, the beloved home of Queen Elizabeth II, has reopened to the public for the first time since Her Majesty's death in September 2022.
And let's speak to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, how significant is this reopening for the locals around Balmoral?
Yes, certainly quite significant, both in Ballater and perhaps in the surrounding area of Aberdeenshire. What we've seen today was quite a train of suppliers and staff going back in. And of course, over the course of the next few months, more than 90,000, perhaps even as many as 100,000 in this coronation year will visit Balmoral and, the 50,000 acres that surrounds it. Quite a destination for hikers and just for people out just to see the royal home, really, in Scotland. The Queen famously was in love with Balmoral and the surrounding area, and perhaps a lot of people locally are thinking whether they can hope to have a similar relationship with Charles. Well, the good answer is that, of course, King Charles has already a very strong relationship with the people of Ballater. Ballater was hit by some quite devastating floods in 2015, and both the Queen and Charles, Prince of Wales at the time, they aided the people of Ballater, both all with helping with the rebuilding of the train station, giving some morale to the troops over in Victoria Barracks, and altogether, quite a strong connection between Ballater. And of course, behind me here is Burke Hall, which is very much seen as the marital home of Camilla and the King. So we should expect to see a lot of them over the coming months.
Yes, I'm sure the locals will really look forward to that, Tony. Thank you so much on what will be a very emotional but actually quite a happy day for the locals there. I mean, it was a place that the Queen loved so very much.
That's right. So still to come, we'll ask what's next for Chelsea after the sacking of their gaffer, Graham Potter. Paul Coit has all the details.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us four, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. The time has gone 25 minutes past 8. Still lots to come on today's programme.
And would you go on a 3-year cruise? 3 years. We'll ask the men organising one what kind of people are signing up for this mammoth round-the-world trip.
I'd do it. And after 9 a.m, Telegraph columnist Madeline Grant will be here giving us her view on the government's new grooming gang task force.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us @gbnews. So it's time to go through all the latest sports news now. Broadcaster Paul Coit, the legend, is here with us. Coity, carnage yesterday. The sack race is on. We've got 2 in one day.
13 now. 13 this season.
Yeah.
13 in all, which is the most that there's ever been. So 2:30. It was Brendan Rodgers for Leicester because Leicester, last-minute goal, 94th minute winner for Crystal Palace. And Leicester have had a terrible time. No win in 6, or in the bottom 3. But the thing is, they'd had a good run, 4 years in. They've been consecutive top 5 over 4 years. FA Cup win for the first time under Brendan Rodgers. But it's not been going well. And it's been probably earlier this season. It looked like there was a good chance he was going to get the sack. But then a lot of fans were hoping for it. And then it cleared up a little bit. And then now I think it's time. It's one of those by mutual consent.
Yeah, and I take no delight in that at all as a Nottingham Forest fan. But anyway, what about Graham Potter? So here's a guy who's got the reverse Midas touch. He's turned Chelsea
into...
Trying
to think about that. Yep,
yeah,
okay,
he's turned Chelsea into the opposite.
Turned gold into, OK,
into,
that makes perfect sense.
It does. And Chelsea are below his former team, Brighton. He had to go.
Well, yes. I mean, let's look what happened. When he left Brighton, the Chelsea job comes up and he's doing really well at Brighton, and Brighton fans obviously wanted him to stay, and they're the ones that are going, oh, yes, you shouldn't have left us anyway. But when a job like Chelsea comes up, you've got to take it, haven't you? It's one of the ultimate jobs, one of the great jobs in football. New ownership, £500 million, which has been spent on new players. £500 million.
Yeah.
And then he started getting criticism saying, you're too nice, which really bugs me because how could you be too nice and saying, oh, you don't have that killer edge and we can see the way you're acting on the touchline. It's up to the person how they are as a personality. But it looks like he probably was out of his depth because it just hasn't worked. He still said the players need time to bed in. There's too many players. But the thing is, too many excuses. And there's... Have you heard of the phrase trust the process?
Yes.
When they talk about trust the process. This came about in time for a history lesson. 2013, it was the Philadelphia 76ers basketball team. And the owner was a man called Sam Hinkie, and he said, look, you've got to trust the process because what we're doing, we're going to do a lot of bloodletting. There's going to be great players that are going to go. We're going to change, but it's going to take time for the club and for the team to build. So ever since that, everybody loves to use trust the process. And Todd Bowley's used it at Chelsea, but unfortunately, they've realised that they can't trust the process because in the Premier League, you cannot wait. It's worked with Arsenal, but I think that's by default. But they've trusted the process and it's worked out. But if you've got the nerve to trust it, but unfortunately, there's too much money involved and not many people do have them.
Should we be trusting the process for David Moyes, then, who's so far avoided the sack? But it was a bit of a nervy win, wasn't it?
It was a nervy win. Southampton were not very good, but then again, you could hear also before West Ham scored, crowd getting uncomfortable. So I think they've already trusted the process, but I think as far as David Moyes is concerned, I think the process is probably, unless... they get plenty of wins together, he could be the next on the list.
So 13 managers down, still no call for Big Sam?
Still no call yet for Big Sam, but there is lots of vacancies. See, if you look at there's Julian Nagelsmann is the manager, or was the manager of Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
So it's this managerial merry-go-round. It's just starting to speed up. You had Thomas Tuchel, who left Chelsea. He's gone in at Bayern Munich. Nagelsmann's available, so it looks like Spurs are interested in him. But now Chelsea have sacked Potter. Nagelsmann's probably going to go in there. You've got Brendan Rodgers is going to slot in somewhere. So that merry-go-round is spinning, and then the managers are going to start jumping on and jumping off.
Talking about spinning, you've got a juicy story here, a tennis story. What's this? An umpire slapped with a lifetime ban. What's been going on there?
Right, well, this is very serious, and you know, if you know me, you know I cover tennis very carefully when it comes to the Dominican Republic, and I watch very carefully what's been going on. Fabian Carrero, tennis umpire, professional tennis umpire over there, 16 breaches over 8 matches. So what he's been doing, because of course betting scandals, and whenever there's breaches and there's dodgy deals, it usually involves betting. What he's doing is actually he gets a handheld thing which actually he would give the score. He would give so the score would go into there. But what he was doing was actually putting the fake score in. So therefore, on certain points, he was making money because there were betting there were betting syndicates that are actually betting on certain points during the game, so he's making sure that those points were happening. Why couldn't actually just shout out every now and again?
And how long
Surely that would be an easier way to do it, but...
How long did this guy get away with this for before he got caught? It's pretty obvious he was cheating.
Over 35 years.
35
years?
No,
that's a lie. No, it wasn't. It was just only over... It was over 8 matches, but it was just that players and everybody's thinking, hold on, this doesn't seem to be working out.
No.
How comes the point's there? And then they've looked deeper into it. He was making a few quid out of it.
They've got a bit of Formula One for us, Coity?
Yeah, Formula One. This is a little more serious, and this was the Australian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen wins again. I mean, he could probably win without, well, in a car probably without wheels, he'd probably still manage to win. Lewis Hamilton came second, Fernando Alonso third, but there was drama at the end. There were 2 laps to go. Kevin Magnussen, who drives for Haas, hit the wall, 2 laps to go, so there's a restart. So they start the restart, and then it looks like we've got a race on with Hamilton just behind Verstappen. But then all hell breaks loose just behind them. There's cars that are going into the gravel, there's cars that are going into the wall, there's cars that are going into other cars. So then they have to restart again, if you follow me, with 1 lap left, but that's behind a safety car. So all it was just a procession at the end.
Absurd.
So that was it. So that was how it ended. I mean, it was a very good race. It was all very exciting, but it's just not the way you want it really to end, is it, behind a safety car?
No, sounds like a pretty dull procession. Yeah. Unlike the Premier League and, of course, unlike your performance this morning, Paul.
Oh, thank you so much, Martin. That's
always
so
a legend.
kind. Spurs-Everton tonight, very big game.
Beautiful, beautiful. Great, thanks for your time. Cheers.
OK, stay with us. We'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the barcode. What would we do without it? And Christopher Biggins and Anna Mihalova will be going through the papers with us next.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. The time is 8:36. Lots of you getting in touch this morning. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We're going to share some of them with you now. We've been talking about the NHS. This is on the front of The Guardian this morning. NHS delays have meant there's been 15,000 children's operations cancelled in 2022. There's now a warning about that getting worse, obviously with the junior doctors' strikes that's coming up next week. Stuart says, here we go again, it's all about pay for doctors. How about making all GPs NHS employees and banning them from seeing private patients? Those who don't like it can go to work entirely privately, but no, because they like their taxpayer-fuelled lifestyle and their private work as a big fat bonus.
Say what you mean there, mate.
Not mincing his words.
Another big story we're covering all morning, of course, is the grooming gang scandal and the tough new clampdown. Kevin from Newcastle, who's actually holidaying in Malta. Hope the weather's nice there. Kevin, you speak common sense from the heart here. The Prime Minister should be straight on the phone to Maggie Oliver and ask her to head up this new task force supposedly tackling the grooming gangs. Kevin, I totally agree with that.
No, she's amazing. Yes, do let us know what you make of that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Right, it's time to go through the papers now, and we're joined by actor and entertainer Christopher Biggins and Deputy Political Editor of The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mihalova. Good morning to you both. You've both been brilliant all morning. Biggins, let's start with you, shall we? And this is the invention of the barcode.
Yes, I know. Happy
birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you.
What do we do without it?
It's 50 years old. Can you believe it's been around for 50 years?
Amazing.
Amazing. And I love this headline they've got in the Mail today, which is the world's best code bar none.
Nice.
Oh,
very good.
Very witty.
Very good.
But I mean, supermarkets, of course, are the main ones. You know, you can't go anywhere in a supermarket without a barcode. I mean, do you think it's like, you know, the man who I can't remember the name of the man now, but who invented the markings on roads? And the cat's eyes, that's right.
Oh, yeah. That's
now, he made a fortune, millions and millions. Do you think the barcode inventor is rubbing his hands saying, this is marvellous after 50 years?
Yeah, the guy who did the cat's eyes was Percy Shaw.
That's right, well done.
He made a packet. The barcode, I don't think, was patented. But, of course, 50 years ago, so Biggins, you'd have been a wee snip of a lad. When that happened.
Very sweet of you.
What about this idea that we're all turning into barcodes now? And that's my worry. It's like it's all like we're all turning into items that move around. It's OK to help with your groceries, but isn't this kind of digitisation of everything and everyone just kind of taking over? It's all a bit Orwellian.
Well, is it Orwellian or is it the way forward? I was actually going to say something else, which is... so the barcode, I learnt today, was invented in order to speed up the lengthy process of cashiers at supermarket chains who were using 19th century methods to try and account for everything. And, you know, we've got queues at Dover. Isn't it time someone invents some barcode equivalent to get these passports getting scanned quicker?
Well, we actually do have that in the kind of new digital passports. I had no problem when I was an MEP going in and out of Brussels, but I think they're just trying to make an example of us at Dover myself.
How was it done before then? Before barcodes?
Well, they just tap in the numbers and bring it through.
Also, I remember absolutely vividly going to a big supermarket near where we lived, or not a supermarket, a department store, and you went to the cash point, and they had a sort of thing where they put your money in and your receipt, and then it went up and it went across the top of the building.
And it's all air shoot.
Air shoot all the way around. It was fantastic.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Oh, it was great fun. Absolutely, children loved it. I remember it was being wonderful. But now those days have gone. Now it's and the other thing which I think is interesting is on television now they show a barcode which you could then put your camera.
Yes, that's clever.
That's very clever onto it, and you could give money and you could do all sorts of things with it. The information you get.
So a nice political story now, Anna's from the Daily Mail. We've been talking a lot about Keir Starmer having a woman problem because of the trans issue, but now we've seen the white van man before. But who might decide the next election, Anna?
So this is a think tank has said that Stevenage woman is going to decide the next election, and this is the woman that Keir Starmer needs to woo. So this is a classic sort of pre-election think tank stuff. We had in the 2019 election, Workington man was going to be the key. Now this Stevenage woman, who is a middle-class, socially conservative, working mum who is concerned with the cost of living. I think it's the last bit that's key, actually, because really, for all the talk we've got of all various issues, it's going to be the economy that really determines the next election for everyone.
So she's fictitious, is she?
Yeah.
Yes.
They
invent a character. They invent
woman.
a character, and then everyone who will sort of define the time and the key voter that politicians need to woo over to get a sizable majority.
But it is that sort of specifically patronising way that politicians reduce people down to a label to target them with votes. But the core of all this, surely, though, is the fact that Keir Starmer still doesn't seem able to identify what a woman even is.
Well, and that was the front page of the Sunday Times yesterday. So on the one hand, he's got to woo over this sort of voter to get a majority, and on the other hand, he is still struggling with the question of what is a woman and do women have penises?
It's interesting what you say about the pound in your pocket, and that's what's going to get people voting in the next election. It's going to be the economy. And for the first time, really, in a very long time, if ever, Labour are actually doing better in the polls, in some of them, in terms of the way that they would like to handle the economy.
Well, and the way the laws of economics and politics often work is the incumbents during a downturn, during a recession, get punished for it.
So what kind of policies do you think might appeal to Stevenage women? What's their specific angle for reining them in?
Well, I thought that the fact that it's a working mum, I think childcare is obviously a big issue, and the fact that the budget had a big, Labour's what was going to be Labour's big plan for childcare. Essentially, the Conservatives got ahead and have announced it first. I think that will be a big deal.
And food costs.
And of course, food costs, definitely. Food costs and general cost of living, I think.
OK. Good. Next story.
Yeah, Christopher, we're talking about Balmoral reopening today for the first time since Her Majesty passed away in September. We are looking at this post-Elizabethan era, aren't we now? And the conversation around the world will be looking at countries becoming republics, and Australia
I know.
is looking to potentially be the next one.
I mean, I think I don't think there's anything against Charles, because Charles has done so well in Germany. And he's come through that brilliantly. I think he's doing terribly well as a king, and I think it was a nervousness that we approached, or he was approached to become king, because I think he's been waiting so long, and the Queen was so brilliant at what she did, and there was no fuss about her. I mean, she was down to earth and wonderful. But I think it's good. I mean, in Germany he spoke German, and he's been practising his Australian. It's Dave Edna. He's been having lessons. But I think it'll be sad if these countries do leave us. I mean, it's.
Do you think it will happen?
Yeah, I think it probably will, because I think their Republicans are very big.
Well, I think there may be a referendum on it. It was always mentioned, of course, that it would never happen during the lifetime of Queen Elizabeth. But this is like a natural point to reassess that historically. But I still believe that if this were to go to a popular vote in Australia, they choose to, as it were, remain.
Well, we shall see. I mean, I think the government is very pro this, and I think, as Christopher says, it's absolutely nothing personal to do with the king, because they've already they took the Queen's face off the $5 note already. So it's just a very much anti-monarchy, even under Queen Elizabeth. But we shall see if there is a referendum.
OK, so what's another health story here? Back to women again. Women missing out on scans.
Yeah, this caught my eye. It's a small story in the papers, but I thought it was very important to mention, which is that thousands of women are missing out on vital breast cancer checks because the way the booking system has changed means that they have to proactively seek out these appointments, whereas before they had automatic appointments that they could turn up or not turn up. This looks to me like very much something that post-pandemic is a way of trying to manage waiting lists and try and get numbers down by essentially making it harder. But it's really worrying because, of course, if someone has to proactively book a scan, they're nowhere near as going to do it as much as if it was automatic and they could do it. So it's a real backward step, and I think it's important to raise awareness so women do go and get those checks and book their appointments.
And it's not cost-saving either. If you look at ovarian cancer, for example, it's one of the biggest killers of women.
Well, it's classic short-termism. You save in the short term on waiting lists, but of course down the line you're absolutely right. It's going to cost the economy a huge amount more.
I wonder, Biggins, if what we need to have actually is a really mature, grown-up, nuts and bolts conversation about what the NHS means and what the future of it is, because we have these stories all the time about the NHS is broken, record waiting lists, we want more pay for doctors, they're leaving the profession. What about overhauling the whole system so we can have a mixture of public and private?
Well, I seriously think it should be overhauled. I mean, I think it's time. Now is the time, and I think we should be doing something about it. The government should be doing something about it. They shouldn't be just dishing out money. They should be looking at what's wrong. And there's so much wrong with the national health. That is the real problem, I think.
Biggins, let's stay with you, because I think you've got a bit of a soft spot for a certain James Norton.
Well, I think he's just brilliant, James Norton. I mean, he's a wonderful actor. I went to see this play last week, A Little Life, and it's 3 3/4 hours. Now, don't be put off by that. I'm all for 90-minute plays or an hour play, but this is one of the best plays I've seen for a long, long time.
Really?
And James Norton is sensational. I mean, have you read the book?
No. Give us a plot synopsis of what happens in it.
Oh, well...
You've got your tissues.
It would depress you so much and depress all your... All I can say is this boy was abused as a 7-year-old and then by a religious group. And that's all I'm going to say. It is I cried. In the interval, I felt sick. I sat next to Lily Allen by chance, and we both decided perhaps we should leave because we were so affected by it. But we stayed, and thank goodness we did stay. It is wonderful. And James Norton, if he doesn't win every award going, I'll eat my jacket and hat if I was wearing one. I mean, he deserves everything he can get. I really do think.
OK, we're on to another story now. Anna, back to you. Gone with the Wind contains hateful, hurtful racism following on the trails of Agatha Christie. Let's rewrite that. And, of course, Enid Blyton books. This Orwellian march towards rewriting all the
surprise,
books.
a 1930s novel about the Civil War does not meet modern standards. I mean, so what's happened here is the publisher, Pan Macmillan, has written a foreword saying, trigger warning to readers, you might not like this novel because it's a little bit racist. Now, it's just so patronising, I think, to readers who... You know, the idea that people can't read and understand themselves, that something does not fit with modern... I mean, it's kind of thing... You mentioned Agatha Christie. You read some Agatha Christie books, there's huge anti-Semitism in them, but it doesn't mean you should be edited. It means you should read them, draw your own conclusions, and evaluate the novelist and the books. I mean, people are intelligent enough to be able to do that, I think.
Yeah, and read it in the context of the time as well. I mean, as you say, 1930s, I mean, it wouldn't be the same way that many people would think today. Yeah. Because what do you make? Because you're so passionate about the theatre and literature.
And reading, but what are we going to do? Are we going to get rid of all libraries? Are we going to burn these books? Are we going to, you know, do terrible things? This is ridiculous. I mean, you learn so much from reading a book, where it doesn't matter what it's saying or what it's up to. You just everything you read, it goes in and you learn and you gather information that you would never get before. I mean, it's wonderful.
I wonder if this will just continue forever. Will we just erase everything?
I think there'll be a backlash, and I hope the backlash will be against these publishers who are really... I mean, first we had Roald Dahl being just rewritten and readers not even... You know, You could buy a book and you wouldn't even know, would you?
But who's asking for it as well? I don't think anybody actually is. It's just the publishers.
Well, I think part of the problem
reversioning them.
is the kind of people who tend to work in publishing tend to be kind of metropolitan, university educated, very switched on to the woke politics.
Yeah.
So I think they're actually fulfilling their own purge. I don't know if the public really care that much.
They don't. I'm sure they don't. I mean, the public want to read a good book.
Yeah.
You know, and I look at my bookcases full of wonderful books I've read over the 50 years I've been reading books. No, longer. And, you know, it's just wonderful. It is that books are the best thing ever. I just love it. I find it very odd when I go to people's homes and there are no bookcases and no books.
Yeah.
Or no paintings on the wall. Very odd.
Okay.
Strange people.
Okay, it begins the final curtain needs to fall on you. Thanks for your performance today. And also, Anna, thanks for joining us on Papers today. It's been superb.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Pleasure.
Both of you.
OK, a former British soldier is preparing to become the world's first double above-knee amputee to reach the summit of Mount Everest.
Yes, Harry Buddha-Magar, a Gurkha veteran, is getting ready to fly back to Nepal to take on the challenge. And our reporter Lisa Hartle went to meet him.
I can walk much faster with this one, but the one is more than 5 kilograms, so not really good for climbing mountains. So let's take this one away.
After losing both of his legs in Afghanistan, former Gurkha Harry Buddha-Magar thought his life was over. But in May, he will be the first double above-the-knee amputee to take on the world's tallest mountain, Mount Everest. After serving for 15 years in the British Army's Gurkha Regiment, Harry was hit by an IED while on patrol.
At the time, I thought that my life is finished. I had to live my life rest of my life on a wheelchair. But also, I would need a carer rest of my life. That's what I thought. So, looking back, you know, who thought that I would be climbing Mount Everest? No, I never thought that. Never thought that. But the good thing is about this, you know, when you are positive and you start doing the things, and it just opens the one door and another, and you see the opportunity, not just about yourself, but also you create an opportunity for other people as well.
Harry had to fight to get the law changed in Nepal, which banned double amputees from climbing Everest. By taking on the mountain, it's his aim to change the negative perceptions that some have around disability.
Hopefully this will make awareness of disability and change the perception on people with a disability, that they don't ban us, or some of people with the disability themselves as well have a courage to challenge themselves and live a meaningful life.
It'll take Harry 3 times as long to conquer Everest, using an incredible amount of upper body strength.
Harry's kind of got a unique challenge in climbing Everest. Harry's climb, by the nature of making it safe, is a totally different climb, and Everest is already expensive, but for Harry it's even more so. So much so that I think after the costs of fulfilling things, Harry needs to raise about £320,000 to make the climb happen. And he's doing really well, but that's the first mountain, and there's a bit of way to go.
This was Harry after climbing 6,000 metres to the summit of Mirror Peak.
Yes!
Harry will begin his climb of Mount Everest in May, which will be an extra 3,000 metres.
Wow. You know, climbing Mount Everest is slightly more risk. My life has always been risk. I went to the war to protect the people's freedom. So I'm very, very happy to take a risk for other people, and that's always been the case in my life.
Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
What an amazing man, total inspiration. Stay with us. Coming up, we'll have more on the government's new plan to tackle grooming gangs.
But first, Greg Dewhurst has your Monday morning weather forecast.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Plenty of sunshine over the next few days as high pressure is in charge, but it does turn a bit wetter later on in the week. And we can see that in the pressure pattern. High pressure just sat to the east of us, keeping these weather fronts at bay. However, Wednesday into Thursday, they will manage to move in, bringing some cloudier conditions and rain for a time. Before then, that high pressure builds back in for the Easter weekend. So this morning, a cold start out there. Frost in places, but quickly melting away. Plenty of sunshine to come through the day, though the cloud does thicken and move in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern and Western Scotland, though it should generally stay dry here throughout the day. Best of the sunshine for much of England and Wales. Blue skies for everyone. Generally light winds. Chilly along the east coast. Temperatures still here struggling to get into double figures, 14 or 15 across some western areas in the best of the sunshine. Into the evening time, it will turn quite chilly as the sun begins to set under those clear skies. Cloud thickening for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland still, but an increasing risk of some patchy rain and drizzle moving in here into the early hours. And just notice the blues returning on the map by the end of the night, indicating a frost out there. Temperatures falling close to, if not below, freezing. So it means a chilly start to Tuesday morning, some ice around first thing, but this will quickly melt away with that strong April sunshine. And then another fine day to come for many areas, just perhaps the Western Isles and parts of the Highlands seeing some patchy rain and drizzle at times. Northern Ireland should largely stay dry, but thicker cloud here through much of the day. And the sunshine also turning hazy for parts of North Wales, Northern England. Best of the blue skies holding on in the southeast. And again, temperatures similar, 11 to 14 for many. Over the next few days, we'll see bands of rain starting to move in. So Wednesday turning wetter and windier, particularly on Thursday, quite a cloudy day before the sunshine tries to return for Friday. Temperatures around average.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak warns against political correctness as he prepares to launch a crackdown on grooming gangs.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Monday the 3rd of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Martin Daubney and Ellie Costello.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
And the government will announce a new task force today to tackle sexual abuse and exploitation. The plan will also include tougher sentencing for those involved in grooming gangs.
The Home Secretary has rejected claims from the Chief Executive of the Port of Dover that Brexit is to blame for the massive delays there over the weekend. Suella Braverman said the queues, which saw people waiting for up to 15 hours, were caused by a combination of factors.
And passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike today. There's significant escalation in the row over pay and pensions. The walkout by over 1,000 staff could have an impact on the delivery of passports in the run-up to the summer holidays.
Donald Trump is expected to travel to New York today as he prepares for a legal battle over hush money payments to a porn star. The court hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, with the former president's lawyer saying he's ready for this fight.
And please get in touch all the usual ways via Twitter at GB News or email gbviews@gbnews.uk. And please let us know where you're watching or listening to so we can give your town a shout out.
To our top story now, and the government will announce a new police task force today to tackle grooming gangs as part of a set of new measures designed to protect women and girls.
The plan will also include tougher sentences for members of grooming gangs, with the Prime Minister pledging not to let political correctness get in the way of the crackdown.
Well, earlier we spoke to Alan Collins, who's a lawyer who specialises in child abuse litigation, about how the new task force could impact the prosecution of such cases.
Lots of training, lots of safeguarding training. So the training is out there, but what we find is that the blinkers go on, or communities may think that the law doesn't apply to them. And so it's all about changing culture. There's been concern expressed that this is a measure designed to punish for failing to report. I think that's losing sight of the issue. The issue is about changing the ethos in many organisations so that they accept and appreciate that they've got an obligation to report any concerns.
Well, join us now is the columnist and parliamentary sketch writer at the Daily Telegraph, Madeline Grant. Some reaction on that top story, please, first, if we could. So, tough talk from Sunak, tough talk from Suella, but we spoke to Maggie Oliver earlier, the legendary campaigner who said she's heard it all before. What's going to be different this time, do we think?
Well, what they say is that I think having the specific insight and wisdom of a task force that is devoted specifically to dealing with grooming gangs means that they could collaborate with police forces and others who may not be used to dealing with such cases day in, day out, and also that by creating this new obligation to report things, that the same kind of fear of trampling on cultural sensitivities will no longer perhaps have the same power that it once did. But I think I have to agree with Maggie Oliver there that, you know, we're hearing an awful lot of tough talk from the government yet, and announcements are coming thick and fast, and there's not very long to go until the election, and people will need to see some results before they can make up their mind on whether it's working.
A Home Office report in 2020 found that most grooming gangs were white, and it also said that links between ethnicity and this problem, grooming gangs, could not be proven. But then we had Suella Braverman, Home Secretary, speaking yesterday, and Rishi Sunak singing from the same hymn sheet, saying that political correctness cannot get in the way of protecting children from abuse. So which is it? It seems like the Home Office and the Home Secretary seem to be at odds with one another there.
Well, I think you only have to look at the scale of the problem across the country in the last few decades. You could watch the excellent documentary that Charlie Peters did for GB News about it, and look at the way that for a long time in Rochdale there were a small number of people repeatedly raising the alarm and being ignored, and this went on for years and years and years, enough that it affected thousands of young women. So I think, clearly, I think the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister, what they're saying is rather more borne out by the evidence there.
Yeah, the evidence is true that 30% of such cases are white people, 28% are Asian. But when you look at the actual ratio of the demographics as a proportion, you are much more likely to be one of these grooming gang offenders if you are a Pakistani man. That's just a fact. The facts aren't racist. But there's been political pushback against this, particularly from the Labour Party, which seems a bit rich when you look at the roll call of Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Newcastle, largely Labour councils.
And it was for a long time, I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, but there was a single female Labour MP who was consistently raising the alarm about this. Sarah Champion. In fact, it wasn't even her. It was before Sarah Champion, I think. She's now retired. But it's often those who do speak up within the party seem to have been ignored by their colleagues.
Do you think they've got the focus right here? We're talking about tougher sentences on gang members, grooming gang members, and specialised support for those local police forces that are dealing with this issue on the ground? Or should we, as we just heard there from our lawyer, Alan, saying, no, this needs to be more about the culture, the victim-blaming culture that we saw in communities and especially in the police?
I think you need to do both, quite frankly. You need to do both. And I think the culture perhaps is slightly more important because that, I think, leads to some of the problems that you see in prosecuting and attaining justice. But no, I mean, this is not something that can be swept under the carpet anymore. It's an absolute disgrace to our country that it ever happened. And I suppose I do have a slight reservation, which is that in kind of making a new statutory requirement for people to report things, that you may end up with people becoming paranoid and reporting absolutely everything, which could see the hotlines being kind of inundated and therefore so much material that it's hard to process. But on the whole, I think this is absolutely timely and necessary.
And how well do you think this will land with Conservative voters who've been crying out for something of this nature for many years?
Well, I mean, I think I think many people would feel it's too little, too late, but also that actually, on such issues, the Labour Party have been fantastically weak, so it is actually an opportunity for the Conservative Party to show that they are listening. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary to me also that wasn't that long ago, it was only a few weeks ago, that there was that astonishing incident where a Quran was scuffed by a group of children. Wakefield, yes. And, it led to what almost seemed like a kind of extrajudicial trial of the mother who had to go and sit before a group of predominantly men.
A Sharia court, it looked like.
Yeah, and, left many people, including me, wondering if, do we now have some kind of unofficial blasphemy law operating in modern-day Britain?
OK, Madeleine, stick with us for some more feedback, but right now we're switching to Darren. So former US President Donald Trump is expected to travel to New York today ahead of his scheduled arrangement tomorrow.
Yes, New York City police have thrown up metal barriers around Trump Tower and blocked roads near Manhattan Criminal Courthouse as they brace for potential protests. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is following the story.
Well, I think it's fair to say that much of the attention here in the United States and indeed across the world will be in New York over the next 48 hours. So not least of all because President Trump is expected to arrive here on Monday evening, going to stay in Trump Towers ahead of that courtroom hearing on Tuesday, in which he could potentially face up to 30 charges in relation to business fraud. That's the allegation against him. Hush money that was allegedly paid to a former porn star, Stormy Daniels, who again it's alleged that he had an affair with more than a decade ago, but it relates to money that was paid during the 2016 presidential election. Now, these are allegations that Donald Trump has vehemently denied. In fact, his lawyer has said that he is well up for the battle, that he is keen to try and fight these charges as quickly as possible, to exonerate him ahead of the next presidential election. But we've ended up in this extraordinary situation where never before has a current or former US president ever faced criminal indictment in the entire history of the United States. And so there are big political ramifications about what may happen here in New York. Unsurprisingly, people are concerned. There are talk about protests going to take place ahead of Tuesday's hearing. There are concerns that they may not well stay peaceful. New York police officers have been called up in large numbers to ensure that there is adequate policing. And this is not just the only potential criminal indictment that former President Trump faces. We know that he's facing other questions about what he may well have done in Georgia during the post-election campaign, also about those documents in Mar-a-Lago that he may well have taken from the White House. And I think the bigger political question beyond what is going to happen here, and it may well be a bit of a circus, because we know that while he's not likely to be handcuffed, he is almost certainly going to have his fingerprints taken, his mugshot taken as he appears in that courthouse, is the question he's going to have on US politics and the next election here. Could it prevent him from becoming the Republican nominee? Could it prevent him? May people here in the United States think that he's not fit to be the next president? Or could it, conversely, rally his base in order that many people feel that he is being effectively persecuted in this criminal dealings, in this indictment? He portrays it as a witch hunt. Could it, as I say, boost his popularity? We will have to wait and see. We'll have to wait to see the detail of the allegations of the criminal indictment against him. But be in no doubt, this will be a crucial moment in US politics, a crucial moment that could determine the next election here in the United States.
OK, let's get some reaction now from Madeleine Grant to that. Astonishing, isn't it, that Donald Trump is perhaps the only politician on earth who get more popular going through a porn scandal. And in fact, I saw him posting a picture of himself in an orange jumpsuit. He's relishing the fact that he's public enemy number one once again.
He really is. I think this, you know, if the plan of all this was to bring the Trump phenomenon to an end, it's clearly not having the desired effect. Donald Trump is back exactly where he likes, feeding off a sense of division and sort of injustice and railing against the elite and racking up loads of newspaper headlines that a few weeks ago were mostly going to his rival Ron DeSantis.
As a sketch writer, I bet you're glad he's back on. You got something to write about at last, because it's Biden. What do you write about? He's awake.
Well, I mostly focus on UK politics, actually. I've never sketched anything American so far, but I think if I were on duty today, which I'm not, I might try to make an exception for this.
What kind of scenes do you think we're going to see in New York tomorrow? We're already seeing the police throwing up barricades and metal barriers. I mean, they think they're going to see a lot of protests tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. I think there will be massive protests. There'll probably be pro-Trump counter-protesting, MAGA hats in the audience and you know, chance of lock him up. And I imagine also that Donald Trump will have many of sort of... I mean, he does specialise in coming up with lines that, although not the most presidential language, have a way of sticking in the general consciousness. So I expect there are going to be a few kind of classic Trump moments today as well.
Yeah, it's going to be televised as well. It's going to be pretty unmissable, like the Michael Jackson trial. I'm looking forward to it. I love the theatre of it all.
Yeah, well, Madeleine, stay with us. We've got lots more to chat to you about in just a few minutes. But for now, The Point is coming up at 9:30. So Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner are here to tell us about it all. What's coming up on today's programme?
Well, we cannot get through 2.5 hours without talking about that man, Trump. Because you're quite right. I mean, he turns adversity on its head, doesn't he? So we're talking to Republicans abroad about that. I think it's a great story, and I think it could almost guarantee him the Republican nomination.
But it's working in his favour, isn't it? I mean, he's actually
It is.
going up in the polls because it's exactly the rhetoric that Trump is, which is him and his supporters against the establishment.
Witch hunt and all that.
Yeah, and his message basically is to the people. I know it feels like the state is against you or like the world is against you. Well, it's against me too, and it makes him one of them. And that's always been his core base, isn't it? That people that feel that he is not part of that elite group of, you know, White House, Washington, kind of people that look down their nose at the common man.
Can I just say, I love The Point. I normally watch it in the gym. I watch you in the gym, and I think it's a great show. It's a good way of bridging the morning. I want to talk to you about the grooming stuff.
Yeah, we're doing
it's something that won't go away. We had Maggie Oliver on.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Maggie.
And basically, the public are telling us, get her involved. Let's have somebody meaty to get this sorted out. Is it just more empty talk?
Well, it better not be, because these girls were failed back spectacularly by the system, by local councils, social services, and it's taken a long time. And I think it's quite interesting that the British Prime Minister is announcing this initiative is of Asian background, his parents are Indian, and the Home Secretary is from a similar background. So that makes, in a sense, it gives them almost a little bit more authenticity. But it's a positive initiative, and they're on the front foot, the Tories, at the moment. There's no doubt about it.
What else you got for us, Bev?
Well, more sort of law and order crime. It's funny, isn't it? But it's such a vote winner, isn't it, crime? And Keir Starmer is talking about Labour's antisocial behaviour plan. We're going to be looking at that. We've got a couple of great panellists in this morning. We've got Sarah Vine and we've got Bushra Sheikh as well to go through some other stories from the papers. So lots. I want to know what you do in the gym. What do you do in the gym when you're listening to us, Martin?
Normally on a treadmill.
Paint me a picture.
Yeah, on a treadmill, getting a bit hot. So I'm not the lad I used to be.
Oh, come on
my
now.
best. But your show gets through the morning. I love the new show.
How long on the treadmill?
2.5 hours from the start to the point to the end.
Half an hour, then some lifting, then some treadmill, then a load of sit-ups.
Every day?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Blimmin' hell.
Yeah. Not today, though.
He's 72. He looks amazing, doesn't he?
You say all the right things.
Lots to look forward to, packed shows. So make sure you tune in to The Point at 9:30. Not very long now to go.
Yeah, so stay with us. We'll be discussing the upcoming sentencing of Olivia Pratt's Corbell's killer in Liverpool. Madeleine Grant will be having her say on that and more. That's coming up next.
You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't
Britain's
wink.
listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 9:19 on Monday morning. The man responsible for killing 9-year-old Liverpool schoolgirl Olivia Pratt-Corbell will be sentenced this afternoon at Manchester Crown Court.
Yes, 34-year-old Thomas Cashman was found guilty last week for murder as he chased a convicted drug dealer into the home of 9-year-old Olivia and her mother, Cheryl Corbell.
Well, Madeline Grant, columnist and parliamentary sketch writer at The Telegraph, is still with us this morning. Madeline, your reaction, first of all, to this case, and the reaction also to the front page of The Sun today, claiming there's a £250,000 bounty on this man's head.
Well, for me, it's been one of the most harrowing cases that I can remember reading about. The idea that a mother hears, you know, as anyone might be drawn to hearing noises and disturbances on the street, she goes to open the door and then inadvertently that leads to the death of her child after, you know, the idea that in broad daylight a pair of drug gangs could be literally shooting each other on the streets of Britain is quite extraordinary, and it's really haunted me. And I think the Sun has an interesting cover story here, which is that gangsters involved with Thomas Cashman in the drug world have put a bounty on his head, 250 grand for anyone who will basically take him out while in prison, and presumably that money would go to their family in the outside world. It seems like a very high bounty, so you know, he will be watching his step. But, you know, it's one of these cases that it's not just horrifying on a personal level of a beautiful little girl being so horribly murdered, but it's also reignited a debate about what the drugs trade really means. I mean, I was, for example, quite surprised to read that someone could be making 250 grand a year from selling cannabis.
Yeah. Well, it's a massive industry now, and like huge plantations in houses. The Mr. Bigs getting nowhere near the actual supply side of it themselves, and there's a huge amount of money, and obviously it means that life has become very cheap. That's the real tragedy of all of this.
But I think you're right, though, that this case particularly struck so many people because of Olivia's age, the fact she's in her own home. The fact, like you say, it's many people's first instinct if they heard disturbance in the street would be to open the door and see what was going on.
Or try to help the person who's being shot, you know.
And then, of course, your child then dies. I mean, you can't even imagine it, can you? I think it really did strike people. And now, of course, the focus today, at least, will be on Thomas Cashman, and people will want a long sentence for him. Many will want a life sentence for the life of
an actual life sentence.
Do you think that's what we'll see happen today?
I should think it will be a tough sentence, as you say. If it's anything less than that, and there'll be a tremendous outcry here. And the fact that he may not have been intending to kill Olivia, but he was intending to kill, and he also wounded Olivia's mother in the process. I think all of this does not look good for him.
Yeah, another story in the papers today. Keir Starmer has identified Stevenage woman as a target voter he needs to woo to reach Downing Street. Might be a good idea if he'd start off by defining what a woman is.
Yes. He seems to be a bit all over the shop there, doesn't he? I mean, he gave an interview with The Times, I think, at the weekend, where he basically sort of semi-reverse ferreted on his position. That 99.9% of women do not have a penis, which was very good of him to acknowledge. But yes, this is every election cycle, it seems that there is a new sort of archetype that the victorious party has to win over. Last election, it was Workington man, and Stevenage woman has been kind of identified by a think tank, I believe, and it will be, you know, a working mum who's very hard pushed, concerned about the cost of living in particular, and also about crime and defence and security. So that these traditional areas which Labour has probably been neglecting recently, but recently they've sought to be really tough on all of these issues. So I think they do get what is needed.
But is it a sign of the direction of Labour when even they are highlighting the fact that the next election is going to be one on the economy? People care about the pound in their pockets, and that's how they're going to be voting.
Of course they do, and actually on that front things are looking very good for Labour, where they are numerous polls have shown that they're now more trusted on the economy than the Conservatives, which is must be quite an alarming statistic if you're a Conservative, because that is their traditional bread and butter. And if the Conservatives can't do the economy, then, what's the point of them?
Just quickly before we wrap, how much of a problem do you think this women problem is for Labour? We saw with Nicola Sturgeon, the gender reformation bill basically brought down her political career, and the SNP are also on a wobble. Do you think, and Posey Parker, the activist, is going to be standing against Stommer, she says, for the party of women, against him in Holborn, making him ask these questions? Do voters care about this sort of stuff, or is it something that journalists get excited about?
Well, I mean, I think, as you mentioned, the Nicola Sturgeon, the gender recognition reform bill, I mean, for all the very clever people in newspaper columns who are kind of telling us, like, this is a culture war issue, the Conservatives don't need to bother about it. But actually, Rishi Sunak and Alistair Jack stood firm, and they refused to allow that to go ahead. And it torpedoed Nicola Sturgeon's career. In the real world, people care very much about these things. And I don't know if it would be the main issue, but it does suggest if you're struggling to define what a woman is, you may struggle with other, basic approaches to government, that you may be less trustworthy on other issues that matter to people as well.
Well, Madeleine, been really good to have you in
Thank
the
you.
studio. Had so many stories to go through with you. Really, really appreciated your analysis, as always.
Thank you.
And thank you to you for joining us this morning. We will be back from 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, we're both back, and up next is Bev and Andrew with To The Point.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm now picturing Martin in the gym watching this show. We've got lots to get through this morning. We're talking about Trump, aren't we?
Big story. Trump going to be the first American president in history to be criminally charged. That's tomorrow, so we're looking ahead to that. Also, the government trying to get to grips with those grooming gangs. It's quite long on, isn't it? The Rochdale gang was 11 years ago.
Yeah, and we get a glimpse of what Labour might do about law and order. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by